Chapter 1271. Because I'm the inner demons. Don't all of you hate inner demons as if they were your mortal enemies? The inner demons said. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. Don't think too much. Mother is not the kind of person you said. Whether it's me or you, we are all her children. Is that really the case? The inner demons murmured, a little expectant and a little nervous. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but laugh. It was the first time he saw the arrogant inner demons so anxious. No, this was the second time. The first time was when he faced Uncle Yuan. It seemed that this guy had completely changed. Young master found it. After waiting for a while, the old woman's voice suddenly sounded from below. Qin Feiyang and the inner demons were refreshed and immediately landed beside the old woman. Why are there two young masters? The old woman was shocked. The other 15 people, and Lei Bao also looked at Qin Feiyang and the inner demons in surprise. Don't be surprised. The spirit snake emperor pursed its mouth and slammed its huge tail on the ground in front of it. Immediately, dust flew. A 3-meter-wide dark passage appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Qin Feiyang and the inner demons immediately jumped in. The dark passage was dark and damp. Because of the previous battle, many places had collapsed, but this didn't affect everyone. The spirit snake emperor walked in front, leading the way and opening the way. Soon, Qin Feiyang found that this dark passage was in the shape of a spiral, leading to the depths of the sea. About a few hundred breaths passed. An ancient stone door appeared in front of them. It's here, the spirit snake emperor said. A group of people quickly ran to the stone door. The stone door was closed, 3 feet high and 5 meters wide, exuding a heavy aura. The inner demons asked, How do we open it? There's a mechanism. The spirit snake emperor flew to the top of the stone door, raised its tail, and pressed it against the wall. Crack! That place suddenly caved in. The stone door also opened. Ordinary mechanisms are set up on the 2 sides of the door, but this mechanism is set up on the top. At that time, I found it for a long time. The spirit snake emperor said proudly. Amazing. Qin Feiyang generously gave a thumbs up to satisfy this guy's vanity. The stone door slowly opened. Everyone stared at the stone door. Their eyes were full of expectations. Finally, the stone door opened a crack could allow one person. Qin Feiyang and the inner demon impatiently rushed in. What entered their eyes was a dark corridor that was at least a few thousand meters long CTS. However, these cells were not made of stone. Instead, they were made of iron pillars as thick as an adult's arm. There were more than 10 cells in the deepest part of the city. There were more than 1,000 people in total. However, their hands and feet were shackled with black shackles. At this moment, some of them were silent, resting with their eyes closed. Some were staring at the wall with dull eyes. There were also some people who spoke softly. However, without exception, their faces were filled with bitterness and despair. Will the young lord come to save us? In one of the cells, an old man in black opened his eyes and asked everyone, Don't think about it. This place is so secretive. Even if the young lord wants to save us, he can't find us. Yes. If the image crystal wasn't destroyed, we could still send a message to the young lord for help. But now, speaking of this, everyone was silent. They looked extremely helpless. The black-clothed old man also sighed and slowly closed his eyes. But suddenly, he seemed to have noticed something and turned to look at the long corridor. Immediately, he saw a group of people walking quickly towards him from the other end of the corridor. As for the 2 people in the lead, who else could they be but the young lords? The young lord is here. The old man in black was stunned. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief and looked again. Immediately, he suddenly got up and shouted, Look, it's the young lord! What? Young lord? Hearing the old man in black's words, the people in the cells were stunned. They quickly got up and followed the old man's gaze to the corridor. It's really the young lord, and Lei Bao. Young lord! The young lord didn't give up on us. We are saved. More than 1,000 people suddenly howled. Some were even crying tears of joy. At the same time, hearing everyone's howls, Qin Feiyang and the inner demons looked at each other. They were also wild with joy and quickly flew over. When they saw the familiar faces, their hearts couldn't help but ache. Greetings, young lord! More than 1,000 people knelt on the ground and shouted loudly. Get up quickly. Qin Feiyang hurriedly said. Everyone slowly got up and looked at Qin Feiyang's group. Some laughed, some cried. Young lord, it's been 3 days since we last met. You're finally here. The old man in black walked to the iron bars and grabbed Qin Feiyang's hand. Tears flowed down his face. A simple sentence was full of bitterness. I'm sorry. If I could have calmed down and seen through the Imperial Preceptor's plan, you wouldn't have been in prison. It's my fault. I've made you suffer so much. Qin Feiyang firmly held the old man in black's hand and looked at everyone. It's okay. Young lord, don't blame yourself. Because we're all willing. Even if we die in the end, we won't have a word of complaint. The old man in black said. Yes, a gentleman will die for his bosom friend. As long as I can help the young lord, it doesn't matter even if I die. Everyone laughed. A gentleman will die for his bosom friend, Qin Feiyang murmured. He didn't expect everyone to be so loyal to him. He was very touched. Suddenly, he let go of the old man in black's hand and bowed to everyone. Thank you for trusting me so much. I, Qin Feiyang, hereby swear that no matter what happens in the future, I'll stand by everyone. We'll share weal and woe together. Young lord, you can't do that. You're the master and we're the servants. We can't accept your bow. The old man in black hurriedly said. No, I'm not the master and you're not the servants. We're friends, family. This, whether it's in the past or in the future, will not change. Qin Feiyang said solemnly. Young lord, why would you fear death? The old man in black laughed. Everyone laughed as well. It was really lucky to meet such a young lord. The inner demons looked at this scene and sighed. The ancients said, treat people with sincerity and make them submit. This was the best way to subdue people. Compared to the original body, he felt ashamed. He turned to look at the spirit serpent emperor and asked, Where's Mother? Over there. The spirit serpent emperor looked at the end of the long corridor ahead. The inner demons and Qin Feiyang turned to look and saw a stone door at the end of the long corridor. The stone door was closed, but above the stone door there was a narrow window for people to see the situation inside. The inner demons immediately ran over. Open the prison and let everyone out. Qin Feiyang turned around and said something to the old woman and the others. Then he quickly ran over. The two of them stood in front of the door and looked inside through the window. This prison was sealed off. The space inside was also very large, about 200 to 300 feet. And in the middle of the prison, a woman in white sat cross-legged on a shabby futon. Her face was haggard and her hair was messy. Her hands and feet were also shackled. At this moment, the woman was also looking at Qin Feiyang and the old man. Although there was a stone door between them, it could not block the woman's motherly radiance, nor could it block Qin Feiyang's longing for his mother. Get out of the way. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang pushed the inner demons away, took out the changshui, and waved his hand at the stone door. After a few slashes, accompanied by a loud crack, the stone door fell to the ground with a loud bang. Qin Feiyang immediately ran into the prison. The woman also slowly got up, with a loving smile on her face. Qin Feiyang stopped in front of the woman, looked at her haggard face, and knelt on the ground with a plop, saying, Mother, I'm sorry, your son is late. The woman was slightly stunned, and quickly bent down to help Qin Feiyang up. She looked deeply at Qin Feiyang's face, and after a long time, she sighed and said, Tian'er, the person who should apologize is actually your mother. Mother. Qin Feiyang looked at the woman in a daze. The woman slowly raised her arm and gently caressed Qin Feiyang's face. She softly said, "All these years, not only have I not fulfilled my responsibility as a mother, I've also always been a burden to you, causing you to worry, be anxious, and run around everywhere. No, no, no. It's not like that. Your son has never thought that mother is dragging your son down. Besides, it's your son's duty to run around for your mother. Your son has no regrets." Qin Feiyang quickly shook his head. What a silly child. Looking at Qin Feiyang's anxious look, the woman could not help shaking her head and laughing. "Ha ha." Qin Feiyang rubbed his head, giggling. "You're an adult, but you still show such a silly smile. Aren't you afraid that your subordinates will laugh at you?" Seeing this, the woman could not help shaking her head and teasing. Qin Feiyang laughed and said, "In front of mother, a son will always be a child. If they want to laugh, let them laugh. You'll never grow up." The woman knocked on Qin Feiyang's forehead, but her face was full of doting. Then she looked up at the inner demons hiding outside the door. Qin Feiyang finally remembered the inner demons. When he turned his head and saw the inner demons' bashful and uneasy look, he could not help laughing and said, "Come in. Why are you hiding there? Are you afraid that mother will eat you?" The inner demons glared at Qin Feiyang angrily and then looked up at the woman. They looked even more reserved than when they saw Uncle Yuan. The woman smiled and said, "Come here." The inner demons looked at Qin Feiyang for help. "I'm also puzzled. Look at you, no matter who you see. You're always lawless and insufferably arrogant. Why do you become like a little woman when you see mother? Can't you be more mature?" Chapter 1272. Little Girl. The inner demons raised his eyebrows and said angrily, "How dare you talk about me like that? Aren't you usually arrogant and domineering in front of others? Now you're like a little lamb in front of mother." Qin Feiyang's face darkened. He turned to stare at the inner demons angrily and said, "You have to make yourself clear. When have I ever been arrogant and domineering? Don't ruin my good image in mother's heart." "You have a good image? I'm a good student." The inner demons looked at him with disdain. Qin Feiyang's veins were bulging. He said angrily, "Does it feel good to go against me?" "You're right. It really does feel good." The inner demons smiled mockingly. His face was full of provocation. "You're good." Qin Feiyang snorted and walked to his mother. "Mother, don't listen to his nonsense. Your son has always been honest and well-behaved." "Tisk." The inner demons raised his middle finger and walked to the woman. He bowed and said, "Greetings, mother." After messing around with Qin Feiyang, the tension in his heart disappeared. Qin Feiyang also had a smile on his face. He had never been a person who liked to mess around. He did this to ease the atmosphere and help the inner demons relax. The woman stepped forward and held the inner demon's hand. She smiled and said, "Don't be so formal. Is this the love of a mother?" The inner demons murmured. The warmth from the woman's hand made him feel a little intoxicated. The woman reached out and hugged the two of them. Her face was full of love. She smiled and said, "You're both my good children. Mother is proud of you." Qin Feiyang was full of smiles. On the other hand, inner demon was completely engrossed. Was this the embrace of a mother? It was so warm. As the inner demons, he had never felt such warmth, let alone the great love of a mother. He couldn't help but be infatuated, especially when the woman said that they were both her good children. His heart melted completely. "Mother," the inner demons murmured in a low voice. They couldn't help but hug their mother tightly, as if they were afraid that she would disappear in the next moment. The three of them hugged each other tightly, revealing their true feelings. Outside the door, the Phantom Serpent Emperor and Lei Bao couldn't bear to interrupt them. Not long after, the old woman and the others also rescued everyone. The old woman walked out of the cell and stood beside the phantom Serpent Emperor. She glanced at the mother and children and prepared to report to Qin Feiyang. Don't disturb them. It wasn't easy for them to reunite. Let them be alone for a while. The spirit Serpent Emperor transmitted his voice. All right, the old woman nodded. Then she turned around and gestured for everyone to keep quiet. Everyone understood tacitly and stood silently in the corridor and the prison cells. For a time, the prison fell into a dead silence. All right, everyone is waiting outside. Don't let them wait too long. A moment later, the woman glanced at the old woman and the others. She patted Qin Feiyang's back and said with a smile, Qin Feiyang and the other two nodded and reluctantly left their mother's arms. Then, the two looked at the iron shackles on their mother's hands and feet. Their eyes flashed coldly. I won't let that old man, the imperial preceptor, have it easy. Qin Feiyang snorted and took out the Chang Shui. With a clang, the iron shackles immediately broke. These iron shackles were made of gravity-divine iron and could imprison the cultivation of living beings. In other words, once bound by these iron shackles, no matter how strong one's cultivation was, they would become ordinary people and be at the mercy of others. The inner demons glanced at Qin Feiyang, then looked up at the woman and said with a smile, Mother, let's go out. All right, the woman nodded. Qin Feiyang and the inner demons supported their mother on both sides and walked out of the cell. Greetings, mistress. The old woman and the others immediately knelt on one knee and greeted respectfully. The woman glanced at them one by one. Her face was filled with relief. She smiled and said, No need to be so polite. Thank you, mistress. Everyone stood up and looked at the woman curiously. The woman had a dignified demeanor and a smile on her face. She appeared very kind. The spirit snake emperor leaned over to Qin Feiyang's ear and whispered, It's time to take care of business. Qin Feiyang narrowed his eyes slightly. The business that the spirit snake emperor was talking about was undoubtedly the self-sealing false god. Qin Feiyang turned to look at the woman and asked, Mother, do you know of a self-sealing false god here? False god? The woman was shocked and shook her head. I don't know, where is it? Lead the way. Qin Feiyang looked at the spirit snake emperor and said, All right. The spirit snake emperor nodded and turned to fly out of the prison. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Mother, please. The woman frowned and quickly followed. A false god was not a small matter and had to be treated with caution. But suddenly, Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed and said, Mother, wait. What's wrong? The woman stopped and turned to look at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. The inner demons were also puzzled. Qin Feiyang took out a facial restoration pill from his bosom and handed it to the woman. The woman looked at the face-restoring pill and looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. The inner demons looked at the woman's expression and angrily looked at Qin Feiyang, saying, Bastard, what are you doing? Don't tell me that even Mother doesn't believe you? Qin Feiyang glanced at him and said to the woman, The situation forced me. I hope Mother can forgive me. Mother understands. The woman smiled, took the face-restoring pill, and put it in her mouth without hesitation. A moment later, the woman's appearance did not change at all. Qin Feiyang sighed in relief. At a time like this, he was afraid that an accident would happen, because in the current situation, the most important thing was to let his guard down. Otherwise, one wrong step and the whole game would be lost. Shua! Qin Feiyang flashed again and entered the castle. He looked at Dan Wangkai and said, Are there any more face-restoring pills? Yes. Last time when you asked me to refine, I refined a lot. Dan Wangkai took out a Qinkuan bag. There were thousands of face-restoring pills in it. Qin Feiyang grabbed the Qinkuan bag and left the castle. He looked at the old woman and said, There are face-restoring pills inside. Verify their identities. If there are any abnormalities, kill them without mercy. Yes. The old woman took the Qianquan bag and respectfully replied. Qin Feiyang looked at his mother and said with a smile, "Let's go." The woman nodded and walked outside. The inner demons walked to Qin Feiyang and asked secretly, "Aren't you being too cautious?" "In such a situation, I have to be cautious." Qin Feiyang sighed. The inner demons fell silent. Although he was a little dissatisfied with Qin Feiyang's actions, Qin Feiyang's concerns were understandable. The woman turned to look at the two of them. Her eyes were full of praise. She asked, "Does the Imperial Advisor know that you're here?" The inner demon sneered. "He knows that we've come to the Sea of Reincarnation, but he doesn't know that we've found his lair. He also doesn't know that his descendants have been slaughtered by us." Slaughtered? The woman's eyes trembled. She said, "Isn't this a little too cruel?" "Mother, can't you see the current situation clearly? The Imperial Advisor wants to usurp the throne. Do you know where they came from?" Qin Feiyang pointed at the old woman and the others. The woman shook her head. Qin Feiyang said, "They're the death warriors trained by the Imperial Advisor. Fortunately, we found them in advance and rescued them." "Rescued?" The woman was puzzled. Qin Feiyang said, "It's a long story. I'll tell you after we leave." "Okay." The woman nodded. Boom! At this moment, a terrifying aura suddenly erupted from one of the cells. Qin Feiyang and the inner demons raised their eyebrows. They turned to look and saw a burly man rush out of the crowd. He was full of killing intent. "There's a spy." Qin Feiyang's eyes turned cold. He shouted, "Cripple him!" Whoosh! The power of thunder rumbled. Lei Bao was like a ghost. He rushed into the cell like lightning and directly shattered the burly man's sea of qi. "Ah!" The burly man screamed and slammed into the wall behind him. "Qin Feiyang, don't be too happy. One day, you'll die in the hands of the old ancestor. The great Qin Empire will also change its name." The burly man stared at Qin Feiyang with hatred and roared. "Change its name?" Qin Feiyang and the inner demons looked at each other. Their eyes were full of mockery. "Lei Bao, it's up to you." Qin Feiyang said coldly. Then he, Heart Demon, and his mother followed behind the Spirit Serpent Emperor and continued to walk outside. When they walked out of the cell, the Spirit Serpent Emperor stopped. "Where is it?" Qin Feiyang looked at the secret passage in front of them and frowned. "It's here." The Spirit Serpent Emperor looked at the stone wall to the left of the cell. Qin Feiyang and the inner demons looked at the stone wall. The stone wall was one piece. Other than an oil lamp hanging on it, they couldn't find anything else. "Watch me." The Spirit Serpent Emperor chuckled. It leaped into the air and pushed the oil lamp lightly. The oil lamp could move. Boom! Following the movement of the oil lamp, a crack appeared on the stone wall that was originally one piece. Then the wall slowly opened. A bone-piercing chill suddenly surged out. You were able to find such hidden doors and mechanisms. The inner demons looked at the Spirit Serpent Emperor in surprise. The Spirit Serpent Emperor smiled proudly and said, "Don't you know who I am?" "Then how did you find it?" The inner demons frowned. "It's a secret." The Spirit Serpent Emperor smiled mysteriously. "Actually, it's not a secret. Other than the fact that the Spirit Serpent Emperor has no aura and can change the color of its skin, it's also very sensitive to the temperature of its surroundings. As for this secret door, although it can isolate the cold current inside, it can still sense it with its own special ability. As long as it finds something strange here, it won't be difficult to find the secret door and mechanism." The woman smiled. "I see." The inner demons was enlightened. The Spirit Serpent Emperor's pupils shrunk. It said in admiration, "Mistress is indeed knowledgeable." The woman shook her head and smiled. She then turned to look at the secret door. The secret door was already halfway open. The chill that surged out was even more terrifying. A layer of frost formed on the brows and hair of the three. There was indeed an ice cellar inside, and it was very big. In the middle of the ice cellar, there was an ice sculpture. The ice sculpture was crystal clear. They could clearly see that there was a black-haired old man trapped inside. How could it be him? When the woman saw the black-haired old man, her eyes trembled. Her face was filled with disbelief. Mother knows him. Chapter 1273. The woman did not reply. She walked into the ice cellar and stood in front of the ice sculpture. She looked at the face of the old man in black and did not speak for a long time. Qin Feiyang and the other two exchanged glances with the spirit serpent emperor and entered the ice cellar as well. They stood beside the woman and sized up the old man in black. The old man was about 185 meters tall. His eyes were closed and his old face was full of wrinkles. He sat cross-legged in the ice. His hair was mottled with white and he was extremely skinny. He was like a bag of bones. Clearly, it was caused by the exhaustion of his lifespan. However, although he was nearing the end of his lifespan, he gave off a sharp aura like a divine weapon. Suddenly, the spirit serpent emperor looked at the old man's glabella and said in surprise, "Look, there's a brand on his glabella!" Brand. Qin Feiyang and the inner demons were stunned. They looked over and a hint of surprise appeared in their eyes. There was indeed a brand on the old man's glabella. However, it was hidden by the ice and was not very obvious. That brand was a word. Prisoner. The inner demons asked suspiciously, "Why is it a prisoner word?" The woman said, "Because he's a prisoner." A prisoner? Qin Feiyang and the spirit serpent emperor exchanged glances. A fake god was a prisoner? Was this a joke? I'm not joking. He's a prisoner. Moreover, the word prisoner was personally branded on his glabella by the late emperor. The woman said, "What? Mother, do you mean that this person was from the same era as the late emperor?" Qin Feiyang was shocked. The woman said, "He was indeed born in the era of the late emperor. However, when the late emperor established the Great Qin Empire, he was only a teenager." "Then who is he?" Qin Feiyang asked. The woman was silent for a while. She turned to Qin Feiyang and said, "You should know a thing or two about the late emperor's great achievements, right?" Qin Feiyang nodded. Back then, under his command, other than the mermaid emperor and the other gods of war, there are also countless brave and skilled generals. They were all unrivaled characters that ruled over a region. They were arrogant and unruly, but they were loyal and devoted to the previous emperor. Later on, many people died in battle with the Heavenly Sun Empire. In order to make it up to them, and also in order to express the gratitude and apology in his heart, the late emperor rewarded the descendants of the 100 generals with the title of Marquis. For generations to come, it will never change. The woman said, "I know about this as well." Qin Feiyang nodded. One of the marquises is the first generation Zhuge Wu Marquis. When the country was first established, the world was not yet stable. At that time, the previous emperor personally controlled the court. And this first generation Zhuge Wu Ho at that time had 3 sons. Among them, the eldest and the second were arrogant and domineering by nature. They relied on the merits of their ancestors to frequently commit crimes. At first, the previous emperor did not care about them because of old friendship. He only warned the first generation Zhuge Wu Ho to let his 2 sons stop. The first generation Zhuge Wu Ho, knowing the methods of the previous emperor, naturally punished his 2 sons at the first opportunity. But his 2 sons were naughty and mischievous. Although they restrained themselves on the surface, they were even more rampant in the dark. They bullied men and women, used power for personal gain, and disregarded human life. It could be said that they did all kinds of evil. Finally, one day, the 2 of them were brought to the throne room. The previous emperor was furious. At that time, he was prepared to kill the 2 of them. However, under the bitter pleading of the first generation Zhuge Wu Ho, The previous emperor spared their lives in the end. The woman said. The inner demons said angrily, For such scum, even if they were cut into pieces, it would not be too much. The ancestors actually spared them. Too merciful. Yes, but the previous emperor was such a kind and benevolent person. However, the previous emperor did not spare them easily. First, he used the elixir of calamity to cripple their cultivation. Then he used a red-hot iron to brand the word prisoner on their foreheads and banish them from the imperial capital, never to return. From then on, the two of them disappeared, as if they had evaporated from the world, never to appear again. The woman said, Elixir of calamity, banished from the imperial capital. Qin Feiyang frowned and looked at his mother. Why are their experiences exactly the same as mine? The woman looked at him, then turned to the black-clothed old man and said, And this person is the eldest son of the first generation Zhuge Wuhou, Zhuge Shinfeng. Zhuge Shinfeng? Qin Feiyang looked at the black-clothed old man and said suspiciously, I have also read the historical records in the imperial palace. Why is there no record of this person? The woman said, Of course, it was the plea of the first generation Zhuge Wuhou to not record it in the historical records. After all, this kind of scandal no one wants to spread to the later generations. Qin Feiyang said, Then how did mother know? It was your grandfather who told me. Your grandfather's ancestor and the late emperor were sworn brothers, so our Lu family is very clear about these secrets. The woman smiled. This, Qin Feiyang and the inner demons looked at each other. Grandfather's master and the ancestor were actually sworn brothers? This relationship was too deep. No wonder Lu Zheng used to put on a self-righteous attitude in front of them all day long. It turned out that he had such a backing. That's not right, mother. The word prisoner in between his eyebrows was branded with a branding iron. This kind of scar can be healed with any healing elixir or regeneration elixir, so why is it still there? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. That is not a simple scar. When the word prisoner was branded, the late emperor used some means, so no matter what he did, he could not remove the word. The woman smiled faintly. Qin Feiyang asked, Even if I cut off the skin? Yes, cut off the skin, and when it grows again, the word prisoner will automatically appear again. The woman said, Our ancestors' means are really awe-inspiring. Qin Feiyang exclaimed. Yes, if they can't remove the word prisoner in their lifetime, it means that they can't wash off this stain for the rest of their lives. This is more painful than killing them. The woman sighed. Then how can we remove it? Qin Feiyang asked. Surpass the late emperor. But how many people in the world can surpass the late emperor? None at all. The woman said, Why not? We can. We will definitely surpass him in the future. Am I right, this venerable one? The inner demons were not convinced. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. The ancestor was the person he admired and respected the most, but he was also his goal. The woman was stunned, looking at the two people who were full of fighting spirit. She couldn't help but shake her head and smile. It's good to have dreams and pursuits, but don't bite off more than you can chew. I understand. The two nodded. The inner demon said, Just now you said that the first Zhuge Wuhou had 3 sons. The first and second were expelled from the imperial capital. What about the third? The third is different from the first and second. The third is friendly and polite. It's also thanks to this third that the bloodline power of the Zhuge family can be passed down. The woman said. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, Mother, you mean Zhuge Mingyang is the descendant of this third? Yes, the woman nodded. I understand. Qin Feiyang sneered. Understand what? The woman looked at him in confusion. These days, I have been thinking about the real identity of the imperial teacher, but I still have no clue. And now, knowing these secrets, I can finally confirm that this person is the second son of the first Zhuge Wuhou. The truth has finally surfaced. Qin Feiyang sneered. The woman was shocked and asked, Tian how can you be so sure? First, the Valley Master told me personally that Zhuge Mingyang is the descendant of the imperial teacher. Second, this is the nest of the imperial teacher. If they are not blood brothers, would Zhuge Shinfeng be at ease and seal himself here? Qin Feiyang sneered. Zhuge Mingyang is the descendant of the imperial teacher. The woman's eyes trembled and asked, Are you sure the Valley Master didn't lie to you? I'm sure. Qin Feiyang nodded. The woman said, Then what else does he know? Although he is the confidant of the imperial teacher is very vigilant. He doesn't know much. However, I can confirm that Zhuge Mingyang is the descendant of the imperial teacher, because when Zhuge Mingyang was breaking through to the Combat King realm, the imperial teacher was personally protecting him. Mother, think about it. If Zhuge Mingyang is not the descendant of the imperial teacher, then with the imperial teacher's usual high and mighty attitude, why would he protect a mere Zhuge Mingyang? Qin Feiyang said, No wonder the imperial teacher would teach him the Azure Dragon's secret art. So it's because of this relationship. The woman suddenly realized this person and the Zhuge family had hidden it really well. The Azure Dragon's secret art was really given to him by the imperial teacher. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. Wait. Suddenly, the woman suddenly stretched out her hand, thought carefully, and said, I remember that the commander of the Kirin army told me that Zhuge Mingyang won a potential pill and opened the third level of potential. But even if he opened the third level of potential, it's impossible for him to break through to the Combat King realm so quickly. He's taking the Blood Demon pill, Qin Feiyang said. Blood Demon pill. The woman's eyes flashed with killing intent as she asked, Then it should be the imperial teacher who let him take the Blood Demon pill. If it's not that old man, then who is it? Qin Feiyang snorted from his nose and said, However, Zhuge Mingyang should also be killed. The woman looked at Qin Feiyang and the inner demons solemnly and said, Anyone who refines the Blood Demon pill, no matter who it is, do not show mercy. Her words were filled with a bone-chilling coldness. Qin Feiyang and the inner demons looked at each other and nodded heavily. The Phantom Serpent Emperor asked, Mistress, if the imperial teacher is really the second son of the first Zhuge Wuhou, then what is his real name? Zhuge Xinyan. The woman said, Zhuge Xinyan. I finally know this old man's real name. Qin Feiyang muttered. The woman looked at Zhuge Shinfeng in the ice sculpture and asked, Tian how do you plan to deal with him? The imperial teacher doesn't care about the descendants here, but he definitely cares about his brother very much. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent 10 9-star combat emperors to guard here, and he wouldn't have hidden himself so well. Therefore, this person is a very good bargaining chip. Qin Feiyang smiled. Originally, the 10 9-star combat emperors were to guard his mother and the villagers, but now that he thought about it, they were actually protecting Zhuge Shinfeng. Chapter 1274. The woman thought for a moment, then nodded. That's a good idea. Everyone knew what kind of person the imperial tutor was. Family was not important to him at all. He only had ambition, power, and desire in his eyes. If Zhuge Shinfeng was not that strong, even if he knew that Zhuge Shinfeng had fallen into Qin Feiyang's hands, he would not have much of a reaction. But Zhuge Shinfeng was a fake god. He was an indispensable fighting force for the imperial tutor. Therefore, he would not give up on Zhuge Shinfeng so easily. As long as he did not give up, he would be bound. At least in the future, the imperial tutor would not dare to deal with Qin Feiyang so openly. Whoosh! At this moment, accompanied by the sound of something breaking through the air, Lei Bao landed beside them. He looked at Zhuge Shinfeng and said, Is he the fake god? Qin Feiyang nodded. I thought he was a young man. I didn't expect him to be an old bag of bones. But I don't mind. Lei Bao smiled, revealing his terrifying fangs, and pounced on the ice sculpture. How dare you! The inner demons roared, grabbed Lei Bao's tail, and threw him out. Lei Bao slammed into the wall of the secret passage, and he immediately saw stars. The old woman and the others rushed over. Seeing Lei Bao in such a sorry state, they could not help but laugh at his misfortune. Laugh again, and I'll kill you all. Lei Bao was furious. He shook his head hard, looked at the inner demons, and shouted, He's not one of us. Why are you protecting him? He's still valuable. If you dare touch him, I'll castrate you. The inner demons said without turning his head. Lei Bao immediately tightened his legs to protect his family jewels. He snorted disdainfully. He's just an old man. What value does he have? How big is your heart? You don't even care about a fake god. The old woman shook her head helplessly and walked toward Qin Feiyang and the inner demons. Regardless of whether he was a friend or foe, a fake god was definitely valuable. Walking to the side of Qin Feiyang and Zhuge Xinfeng, the old woman glanced at Zhuge Xinfeng and bowed. Greetings, young masters and mistress. Qin Feiyang asked, What do you think? The old woman said, Everyone's identity has been verified. Apart from the burly man at the beginning, there are no problems with the others. Very good. Qin Feiyang nodded. He turned to the woman and said, Mother, no matter what, you have to come with me this time. The woman's body stiffened. After a long silence, she shook her head and said, Mother can't leave yet. Why? Both of them looked at her in confusion. The woman sighed. Because the imperial tutor used the blood soul technique to control me. Damn bastard. The inner demons were furious. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but clench his fists. Yeah, we are still being controlled by the blood soul technique. If we don't kill the imperial preceptor, we won't be free at all. The crowd outside also became restless. Quiet! Qin Feiyang shouted. Young master, you have to help us. We don't want to be controlled by the imperial preceptor anymore. We don't want to work for him anymore. People exclaimed. I told you to be quiet. Didn't you hear me? The inner demons shouted. Bloody light surged in his eyes. Everyone immediately shut up. The place fell into a dead silence. Qin Feiyang glanced at everyone. He turned to the woman and said, Mother, if it's because of this, you don't have to worry at all. Because I have found a way to break the blood soul technique. Really? The woman looked at him in surprise. The people outside were also looking at Qin Feiyang in bewilderment. Really? Qin Feiyang nodded. That's great. We are saved. Everyone immediately cheered in their hearts. The woman looked at Qin Feiyang and the inner demons and said with a smile, It seems that you don't need Mother to worry about you anymore. Of course. With our current foundation and ability, we can definitely contend with the Imperial Palace. The inner demons said proudly. Contend with the Imperial Palace, the woman murmured as if she wanted to say something, but didn't. Plop! Qin Feiyang knelt on the ground and said, Mother, I can't lose you again. Come with me. The inner demons looked at Qin Feiyang and also knelt in front of the woman with a pleading face. Mistress, young master has been looking forward to reuniting with you day and night. Please fulfill his wish. The old woman also knelt and pleaded. Yes, although we haven't known young master for long, we can all see that he cares about you a lot. You can stay by his side. The others also knelt on the ground and pleaded for Qin Feiyang. Thank you, everyone. Qin Feiyang glanced at the group of people and was very touched. The woman glanced at them one by one, and her face was full of gratification. With such a group of loyal and devoted people by Qin Feiyang's side, what was there to be worried about? In the end, the woman's gaze fell on Qin Feiyang and the inner demons and said with a smile, Let's go out first. So Mother has agreed? Qin Feiyang said. Let's go. The woman smiled and turned to walk outside. The crowd outside immediately stood up and made way for her. Qin Feiyang and the inner demons looked at each other with smiles on their faces. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and kept the ice sculpture into the castle. Then he quickly chased after his mother. Deity, I have to remind you, you are now in a conscious state and can't stay outside for too long. The blood demon chased and transmitted his voice. Yes. Qin Feiyang patted his head. He actually forgot about this. Suddenly, he rolled his eyes and looked at the inner demons and said with a smile, Look, the matter here is almost solved. Shouldn't you go back to the inner world? You are burning the bridge after crossing the river. The inner demons immediately raised his eyebrows. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, If it wasn't for Mother, you can stay outside for as long as you want. But now I really want to talk to Mother. Can you help me? No. I also want to talk to Mother and cultivate our relationship. The inner demons said, Bastard, don't forget this is my body. Qin Feiyang said angrily, It's also mine. The inner demons snorted coldly. Qin Feiyang said with a dark face, Do you have to be like this? Oh, why don't you understand? Yes. All these years, you and Mother are far away from each other. It's difficult to see each other. But when you were young, you often spent time with her. Look at me. This is the first time I see Mother and the first time I feel motherly love. Can't you let me stay a little longer? The inner demons frowned and said with a hint of pleading in his tone. Hearing the inner demon's words, Qin Feiyang was silent. Then he sighed and said with a smile, Well, you can stay a little longer. I will go to the inner world to cultivate and then come out. Thank you, the inner demons said. You are welcome. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked up at his mother who was walking in front and said, Mother, I will come out to accompany you later. The woman stopped and turned to look at Qin Feiyang and the inner demons. She nodded and said with a smile, Okay. Swish. Qin Feiyang's figure disappeared immediately. Lei Bao saw this and his pupils shrank. He moved to the side of the inner demons and asked, Boss Qin, what is going on? Why are there two of you? The inner demons was not in the mood to talk to him. He quickly ran to the woman. What is the meaning of this? Lei Bao grumbled and then looked at the spirit serpent emperor and said with a smile, Little snake, you have been with Boss Qin for so long. You must know. The spirit serpent emperor turned and stared at Lei Bao. What did you call me? Say it again. Lei Bao's body stiffened and he smiled flatteringly. Big brother serpent emperor, uncle serpent emperor. That's more like it. The spirit serpent emperor smiled proudly and asked, Have you heard of the inner demons? Inner demons? Lei Bao was stunned and said angrily, I have not seen the world before, but I know about the inner demons. But didn't they say that these things don't exist in this world? Who said so? Let me tell you. Boss gave birth to the inner demons, and the one controlling that body is the inner demons. The spirit serpent emperor said. What? Lei Bao's eyes widened. It was actually the inner demons. No wonder he felt that Qin Feiyang's temperament was completely different from when he first met him. The old woman and the others behind were also shocked. They did not expect that there was an inner demons hidden in the young master's body. They also did not expect that the young master could live peacefully with the inner demons. After Lei Bao came back to his senses, he asked, In other words, the one who disappeared just now was the real Qin Feiyang? Yes. The spirit serpent emperor nodded. This is unbelievable. He can actually share body with the inner demons, Lei Bao muttered to himself. He was shocked and asked, How did Boss Qin do it? The spirit serpent emperor said, 2 words, subduing people with virtue. Subduing people with virtue. 2 words? Do you know how to count? Lei Bao rolled his eyes and lowered his head to ponder. Subduing people with virtue. After a while he shook his head and smiled. This ferocious person really could not be looked at with normal eyes. After a while, The inner demons and the woman flew out of the secret passage and stood on top of the island, looking down. Lei Bao, the spirit serpent emperor, the old woman, and 1,000 over combat emperors also flew out and stood behind the inner demons and the woman. Young master, help us remove the blood soul technique, a black-robed man said impatiently. Once the blood soul technique is removed, the Grand Master will find out. So, I have to trouble you to wait. Now go and look around the island. See if there is anything suspicious. The inner demons said, Yes. Everyone bowed and responded. Then they turned into streams of light and flew in all directions. The woman looked at the inner demons and asked with a smile, Tian, what are you looking for? Hearing this, the inner demons felt very warm in his heart, because this meant that his mother really treated him as her own son. The inner demons said with a smile, I both suspect that there might be a land of inheritance hidden here. Land of inheritance? The woman was surprised. Yes, when we fought with the Grand Master's descendants, they all used the same kind of divine arts. There is only one explanation for this situation, and that is the land of inheritance. The inner demons said. That makes sense. The woman nodded. The inner demons said, Also, there must be a herb field here. I just don't know if it is on this island or another one. The woman smiled and said, Now that you have so many people under your command, you do need a lot of herbs. The inner demons said, These things have nothing to do with me. I will take care of them. The woman asked curiously, Then what does it have to do with you? Killing people. I am only responsible for killing people. The inner demons laughed, and his eyes were filled with a strong bloody light. The woman's heart trembled. She grabbed the inner demon's hand and said, Although you are the inner demons, you must remember that you can't be too murderous. Otherwise, you will lose yourself sooner or later. Will I? The inner demons was stunned. Yes, the woman nodded with certainty. The inner demons took a deep breath and nodded. I will remember. The woman smiled and looked down at the old woman's group, saying, Tell me about them. Okay. The inner demons immediately told everything in detail. Time passed by. After listening to the inner demons, the woman sighed deeply and said, I didn't expect the Grand Master to do so many heartless things over the years. As the inner demons, I admit that I am cruel and merciless, but compared to him, what I have done is nothing. The inner demons snorted. The woman said, This time, you killed 1 million of his descendants. Is that nothing? They deserve to die. The inner demons said, Mother didn't say they shouldn't be killed. To be honest, I didn't expect the 2 brothers to not only return to the capital, but also reproduce here. 1 million descendants is not a small number. If you hadn't discovered it in time, the Grand Master would have rebelled. The consequences would have been unimaginable. The woman sighed. The inner demons asked, Mother, do you mean that I didn't do anything wrong? The woman smiled and said, The great Qin Empire was built by the late emperor. You protected the great Qin Empire and its billions of people. What's wrong with that? The inner demons sighed in relief. The woman said, Actually, you don't have to worry. No matter what you do, as long as it benefits the great Qin Empire, I will not object. Thank you, Mother. The inner demons was touched. Silly boy, the ones who should be thanking you are your father and mother. You're still so young, but I let you bear such a heavy burden. Mother is ashamed. The woman sighed. Don't mention him. My original body, and I did this purely for mother and ancestors. It has nothing to do with him. The inner demons snorted, a cold light flashing in his eyes. This him was naturally referring to the current emperor. The woman glanced at the inner demons and sighed inwardly. She smiled and said, Let's not talk about what's troubling you. Let's talk about your next plan. The next plan The inner demons pondered for a while and shook his head with a smile. Let me worry about this. I'm only responsible for killing people anyway. One is responsible for planning, and the other is responsible for killing people. The two of you really have a clear division of labor. The woman couldn't help but shake her head and laugh. The inner demons laughed. However, Mother is very pleased to see you two so harmonious. That's right. The people in that village are loyal to you. Don't let them down, the woman said. The inner demon smiled and said, Mother, don't worry. We will treat them well. The woman nodded. Whoosh! At this time, the old woman streaked across the sky and landed in front of the inner demons. She cupped her hands and said, Greetings, young master. How is it? The inner demons asked. The old woman shook her head. The inner demons frowned and said, Then let's wait for everyone. In a short while, the others returned one after another, but the answer they gave was the same as the old woman. They did not find anything. Lei Bao said, The land of inheritance and the herb field must exist. If they are not here, then they must be on another island. The inner demons nodded and glanced at everyone. He opened the portal and said, Let's go and meet up with everyone. Whoosh! Immediately. Chapter 1275. The reincarnation ocean was vast and boundless. Not only was it full of mystery, but it was also full of danger. Somewhere, a huge island stood on the surface of the ocean. On the island, the mountains and rivers had collapsed, the earth was shattered, the void was filled with blood mist, and the ground was full of corpses. Here, it had become Azura hell, and the smell of blood was pungent. At this moment, in the sky above the island, a group of people and beasts were gathered. Their bodies were dripping with blood, and their killing intent was overwhelming. Swoosh! Suddenly, a blood-haired youth appeared. It was the inner demons. Greetings, young lord. Seeing the appearance of the inner demon, whether it was the people or the ferocious beasts, they all bowed. The inner demons scanned them one by one, regardless of whether it was the 9-star emperor beast or the people in the village. There were casualties. However, as long as they could kill all the descendants of the state preceptor, everything would be worth it. Thank you for your hard work. I have already done what I promised you. The inner demon smiled. Before he finished speaking, the woman, Lei Bao, Spirit Serpent Emperor, the old lady, and the other 16 people, as well as more than 1,000 combat emperors, appeared one after another. Seeing that more than 1,000 people had appeared in front of them alive, everyone was wild with joy. Have all the people here been killed? The inner demons asked. An 8-star combat emperor stood out and looked at the inner demons. Other than a few fish that escaped the net, basically all of them have been killed. Very good. Then, have you found any herb fields or other things on this island? The inner demons asked. The 8-star combat emperor cupped his hands and said, I was just about to report this to you, young lord. Tell me quickly. The inner demons was overjoyed. The 8-star combat emperor said, We found a herb field and a statue on the west side of the island. Herb field statue. The inner demon's eyes trembled, and he said excitedly, Bring me there quickly. Without a doubt, that statue must be used for the legacy. Yes, the 8-star combat emperor responded respectfully, then turned and flew toward the west side of the island. The inner demons hurriedly followed. The woman looked at everyone and smiled. Let's go and take a look. Only then did everyone realize that there was an unfamiliar face. An old man asked suspiciously, Lei Bao, may I ask who this is? Lei Bao said she is Boss Qin's mother. So it's mistress. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts, and they all knelt in the void and said respectfully, Greetings, mistress. The woman stretched out her hand and said, Everyone, quickly get up. Everyone looked at each other. It seemed that this mistress was not as difficult to get along with as they had imagined. Actually, I should be the one thanking everyone. Tian's life has been full of ups and downs ever since he was born. It was all of you who were by his side, silently helping him through the trials one after another. So I thank you all. Please continue to help Tian. The woman bowed and said, Mistress, you can't do this. If young Lord hadn't saved us, we would still be pawns in the imperial preceptor's hands. A drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring. Therefore, no matter what happens in the future, we will pledge our lives to follow young master. The old man said, Yes, I'm willing to be your dog and horse. I'll never leave you. The crowd roared. The woman was very gratified. With such a group of loyal and devoted people following Qin Feiyang, what was there to worry about? On the west side of the island, there was a big canyon. Around the canyon, there were overlapping mountains, and it was magnificent. Swoosh! Accompanied by 2 air-rending sounds, the inner demons and the 8-star combat emperor landed in the sky above the canyon. The 8-star combat emperor said, The herb field is here. The inner demons hurriedly lowered his head to take a look, and his face was instantly filled with ecstasy. The canyon covered an area of dozens of miles, and it could be said to be very big. In the canyon there was not a single weed, and it was filled with herbs. A strong medicinal fragrance could be smelled from afar. Swoosh! He waved his hand, and Fatso and Lu Hong appeared. So many? Looking at the herbs that were swaying in the wind and overflowing with multicolored light, the 2 of them were dumbfounded. Most of them were very rare and precious herbs. They had not even seen some of the herbs before. The inner demons said, I'll leave this herb field to you. Okay. The 2 of them nodded. The inner demons turned his head to look at the 8-star combat emperor and asked, Where's the statue? The 8-star combat emperor pointed to a giant mountain on the right and said, The statue is on the peak of that mountain. The inner demons raised his head and looked. The giant mountain was located not far from the right side of the canyon. It was like a giant sword that pierced through the clouds. You stay and help. The inner demons instructed the 8-star combat emperor. Then he turned into a stream of light and flew toward the peak of the mountain. The giant mountain was thousands of feet tall, and it towered into the sky. The peak of the mountain looked as if it had been flattened by a giant axe, and a statue that was more than 100 feet tall stood in the center of the peak. The statue was of an old man. He had his hands behind his back, and he raised his head to look at the sky. He was like an overlord of heaven and earth, and he was filled with a shocking and arrogant aura. Under the old man's feet was a giant python. Furthermore, this giant python had a total of 9 heads. Although it was also carved out of stone, the way it bared its fangs and brandished its claws made it seem like a real living creature. It gave people a feeling of fear and trepidation. Whoosh! The inner demons landed in front of the statue and looked at the face of the statue. His brows gradually furrowed. He had never seen this face before. Originally, he thought that this statue should be the imperial tutor or Zhuge Shinfeng. He did not expect it to be a person he had never seen before. Whoosh! At this moment, the woman flew through the air and landed beside the inner demons. She looked at the statue and said, He is the first Zhuge Wuhou. So it is him. The inner demons muttered. The woman said, The 9-headed giant python under his feet was his mount when he was alive. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang appeared again. He looked at the statue and turned to look at the woman. Mother, since his statue is here, does it mean that he was the one who secretly brought the imperial tutor and Zhuge Shinfeng back to the imperial capital? It must be so. Otherwise, the imperial tutor and Zhuge Shinfeng would not have been able to sneak back to the imperial capital without anyone knowing. I think the Zhuge family in the imperial capital must know about this. The woman said, The Zhuge family is really courting death. The inner demons smiled coldly and stepped forward. He cut his finger, and a drop of purple gold dragon blood flowed into the statue's glabella. I know what you want to do. It's useless. The woman looked at the inner demons and said, Why is it useless? The inner demons frowned. This kind of inheritance must have the same bloodline power. In other words, you must have the bloodline power of the Juga family, and it must be the purest bloodline power to obtain his inheritance. The woman explained, Humph. All the land under the heavens belongs to the emperor. All the land under the heavens belongs to the emperor. A mere Wuho dares to go against the emperor's authority? The inner demon snorted, and the emperor's chi lurking in her body roared out and pounced on the statue. The woman's heart trembled. She did not expect this child's chi of the emperor to have reached such a level after all these years. Even she could not help but want to worship him. Buzz! The statue immediately emitted a black light as if it was about to come to life. The next moment, a dazzling divine light shot out from the glabella of the statue and pierced through the sky, directly into the glabella of the inner demons. The inner demons immediately sat cross-legged on the ground, closed his eyes, and carefully comprehended. It really worked. The woman was surprised. Qin Feiyang sneered and said, This is the difference between an emperor and a subject. A subject will never dare to go against the emperor's will. The woman looked at Qin Feiyang, and her heart was filled with emotions. Thinking back to the past, this child in front of her was so innocent. And now, the child had grown up and matured. He already had the capital to control the overall situation of the world. She could completely rest assured. The woman smiled and said, Tian, I'm going to take a look at the herb field. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He turned and said, I'll go with you. The woman shook her head and smiled. It's not like I don't know the way. Why are you accompanying me? Besides, you're in a conscious state now. You can't go too far. All right then. When we get the inheritance, we'll immediately meet up with you. Qin Feiyang said. Indeed, as his mother said, he couldn't leave his body in a conscious state. If he denied it, his consciousness would dissipate. Okay. The woman nodded and turned to fly in the direction of the herb field. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang also returned to the inner world and comprehended the inheritance together with the inner demons. Time passed quietly. The next day, the inner demons suddenly opened his eyes. 2 dazzling divine lights burst out. Immediately after, he raised his hands and opened his palms. Flaming battle chi poured out from his palms. Boom! 2 divine powers emerged. The next moment, a fiery red sun and a waning moon appeared at the same time, suspended in the left and right palms, respectively. Divine powers surged and shocked all directions. Ha! Looking at the sun and the waning moon, the inner demons couldn't help but laugh to the sky, resounding through the clouds. Whoosh! The woman streaked across the sky like lightning and arrived at the top of the mountain. Looking at the sun and the waning moon in the inner demon's palms, her face was full of shock. The inner demons leaped up and landed beside the woman. He smiled and said, Mother, your child has obtained the inheritance, and it's a complete inheritance. I know. The woman nodded. Mother knows? This time, it was the inner demons who were surprised. Legend has it that the first Juga who mastered a divine art called Eclipse Moon. This divine art has a total of 3 moves. The first move, Dark Moon. The second move, Eclipse Sun. The third move is Eclipse Moon. The woman smiled. The inner demons nodded and said, That's right, your child has obtained Eclipse Moon. Back then, the divine art that the patriarch and the great ancestor used was this first move, Dark Moon. However, with different battle chi, the color of the dark moon was also different. Although I know about Eclipse Moon, I didn't expect that the first Juga Wuho would actually leave behind a complete inheritance. I have to admit, your luck is really good. The woman chuckled. Of course, Uncle Yuan personally said that I'm a person with great luck. The inner demons said proudly. The woman rolled her eyes and scolded with a smile. I said that you're fat and you're really arrogant. The inner demons chuckled, but suddenly. Chapter 1276. Not everyone can receive the complete succession. The chi of the emperor has played a huge role in your success. The woman smiled. Just as the inner demons had said yesterday, the land of the emperor was the land of the emperor, and the people who lived on the land were the emperor's subjects. As a subject, how could the first Zhuge Wuhou dare to go against the emperor's authority? The inner demons said, What about Zhuge Mingyang? The woman said, Only he and the imperial advisor know if he has received the complete succession. Qin Feiyang appeared again and said, I believe Zhuge Mingyang has received the complete succession. Otherwise, the imperial advisor wouldn't value him so much. That makes sense. The inner demons nodded and looked at the statue. Should we get rid of it? Of course, Qin Feiyang said. Keeping the statue would only benefit the imperial advisor and the Zhuge family in the imperial city. Destroying the statue would be the same as destroying the Zhuge family succession. The inner demons chuckled and dispersed the sun and moon in his palm. He then raised his arm and threw a punch at the statue. However, following a loud explosion, the statue only trembled a few times. It was not damaged at all. What's going on? The inner demons frowned. Not only did he fail to destroy the statue, his arm was numb from the impact. The woman glanced at the statue and said, Even with your cultivation of the 9-star battle monarch realm, you can't break it. I believe the statue has been refined with the force of a pseudo-god. Do you think I can't do anything about it? The inner demons took out Chang Shui and rose into the air, swinging his arm vigorously. Clank! A crack appeared on the top of the statue. Even the hardest rock can't resist Chang Shui's attack. The inner demon let out a cold grin. He swung his arms and sliced the statue into pieces from head to toe, following a series of clanking noises. Qin Feiyang looked at the woman and said, Mother, can you tell me the origin of Chang Shui now? The woman pondered for a while and shook her head with a smile. It's not time yet. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, Then when can you tell me? The woman smiled, then turned and left without saying a word. Looking at his mother's back, Qin Feiyang's face was full of helplessness. Done. After a while, the inner demons put away his dagger and glanced at the gravel on the ground. He smiled coldly and then turned to Qin Feiyang and asked, Where's Mother? Qin Feiyang said they should have gone to the medicinal field. Let's go there too. The inner demons nodded. The two of them soared into the air and flew towards the canyon. Inside, the inner demons Fatty and Lu Hong led everyone as they busied themselves with work. How's it going? Qin Feiyang stood above the canyon and glanced at everyone. He then landed beside Lu Hong and asked with a smile, This herb field is really amazing. I've never seen many of the herbs before. After moving all these herbs to the ancient pagoda, I'll check them one by one with the pill scripture. Lu Hong said, How much longer will it take? Qin Feiyang asked. Lu Hong looked at the busy people and said with a smile, Soon. Okay then, continue with your work. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked around. He found his mother standing on the top of the mountain on the right side of the canyon. She seemed to be thinking about something. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang and the inner demons looked at each other and flew to their mother's side. Qin Feiyang asked, Mother, what are you thinking about? The woman smiled and said, I'm thinking about the future. The inner demons said, What's there to think about? We'll take it one step at a time. The woman said, Don't you want to be a chess player and compete with the other factions? Then you have to see the future to be sure of your chances. Qin Feiyang nodded. The woman turned to Qin Feiyang and asked, Tian, What do you think the future will be like? Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment before a bright light flashed in his eyes, and he said confidently, I don't dare to make any assertions about anything else, but there's one thing I dare to say. In the future situation, I'll absolutely not be a chess piece. The woman smiled faintly and said, Do you want to hear my thoughts? Mother, please tell me. Qin Feiyang said. The woman said, The great Qin Empire situation in the next 10 years won't change much from now. Why? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. The woman said, Because some things are far more complicated than you think. Remember my words, before you break through to the war god realm. Don't push the imperial teacher too hard. What do you mean? Qin Feiyang frowned. You'll understand in the future. However, with your current strength, you can enter the imperial city openly. The woman smiled. Qin Feiyang looked deeply at his mother and fell silent. The inner demon sent a voice transmission. Deity, does mother mean that the imperial preceptor has a backer? Backer? Qin Feiyang was startled and said, If you say something else, I'll believe you, but a backer. I want to ask you, who in the world is qualified to be the imperial teacher's backer? I don't think so. The inner demons shook his head and said, But we can't rule out that there's someone stronger than the imperial teacher hiding in the great Qin Empire. Someone stronger, Qin Feiyang murmured and sighed. Maybe this world isn't as simple as we think, but there's nothing to think about. We'll deal with it when it comes. Wrong. If one comes, I'll kill one. If two come, I'll kill two. The inner demons laughed. Qin Feiyang was stunned and then smiled helplessly. Although this guy had changed, his murderous nature was stronger than before. Next, Qin Feiyang and Qin Yu avoided those heavy topics and chatted with their mother about their daily lives. Time passed by. About half an hour later, Lu Hong and Fatso brought everyone to the top of the mountain. Each of them held a Qianquan bag in their hands. The Qianquan bag was filled with medicinal herbs, and in order to plant them in the ancient pagoda, everyone uprooted these herbs. Qin Feiyang asked, Is it done? Fatso and Lu Hong nodded. Qin Feiyang said, Well, now I'll help everyone remove the blood soul technique. Those who are controlled by the blood soul technique stand together. Great. We'll be free soon. The thousands of people controlled by the blood soul technique were all overjoyed. They ran out of the crowd and stood on the other side of the void. The woman also walked over. Fatso said, Boss, wait, Wang Yishan hasn't come back yet. That's right. Qin Feiyang patted his head and turned to look at the inner demons. Send a message to Wang Yangfeng immediately. The inner demons took out the image crystal. Buzz. Not long after, Wang Yangfeng's shadow appeared. Wang Yishan, the seahorse, and the seal all stood beside him. Qin Feiyang asked, How's the chase going? Wang Yangfeng said, We found 50 to 60 people on the nearby islands and have killed them all. What about their cultivation? Qin Feiyang asked. Wang Yangfeng said, Except for a 2-star battle saint and a dozen battle masters. The rest are all battle emperors. Forget it, don't chase them. We'll be back soon. Qin Feiyang said and gave Wang Yangfeng the coordinates of the medicinal field. Yes, Wang Yangfeng respectfully replied and turned off the image crystal. In less than 3 breaths, 2 men and 2 beasts descended above the mountain peak. Qin Feiyang looked at Wang Yishan and said, Stand beside my mother. I'll help you remove the blood soul technique. Who is the mistress? Wang Yishan was surprised. Her. Qin Feiyang pointed to his mother. Greetings, mistress. Wang Yishan and Wang Yangfeng hurriedly bowed. You don't have to be so polite. Moreover, in terms of seniority and age, I should address the 2 of you as seniors. The woman cupped her hands and smiled. We don't dare, we don't dare. The 2 of them waved their hands in fear. Qin Feiyang looked at the 2 of them and said with a smile, We're all on the same side, so there's no need to be so polite. Quickly stand there. Yes. Wang Yishan glanced at the woman and quickly walked behind her. Qin Feiyang looked at the inner demons and said, "Let's begin." The inner demons nodded, placed his hands in front of his chest, and quickly formed a seal. Immediately, one slave seal after another appeared and flew towards everyone. But it did not directly rush into everyone's skull, but floated above everyone's head. The inner demons did this for a purpose. Once someone's blood-soul technique was broken, the state preceptor would know immediately. Imagine what the state preceptor would do if he knew. He would definitely make a prompt decision and immediately abolish the bloodline power of others. Therefore, the inner demons must remove everyone's blood-soul technique in an instant, so as to ensure that they would not lose a single soldier. Imperial Palace, the Imperial Garden. The chess game had also reached the most tense moment. The Emperor and Lu Zheng did not say a word from beginning to end, quietly watching the two play chess, but in their hearts they were thinking about their own thoughts. At this moment, the second grandpa held a chess piece and glanced at the chessboard, but did not place it for a long time, as if he did not know how to make this move. "You have been thinking about this move for a whole hour. Can you hurry up?" The state preceptor frowned and looked very impatient. The second grandpa said lightly, "Playing chess is like doing things one wrong move, and the whole game will be lost. I have to be very careful." The state preceptor raised his eyebrows and said, "The winner of this game is a foregone conclusion. No matter what you do, you can't beat me." "That's not necessarily true." The second grandpa smiled faintly. Judging from the chess game, the second grandpa's side was indeed a dead end, but there was no sense of frustration on his face. The state preceptor's eyes flashed, and he said, "You should be stalling for time, right?" "Stalling for time?" The second grandpa was stunned and said suspiciously, "Why do you say that?" The state preceptor smiled and said lightly, "You and I are both sensible people. Why pretend to be stupid? But it doesn't make any sense for you to do this, because the winner is already determined. If you win now, it may not be a win. If you lose now, it may not be a loss. The result is the most important." The second grandpa also smiled. The conversation between the two could be said to be a confrontation, but what they were aiming at was not the result of this game of chess. To be honest, they did not care about the result of this game of chess. What they were aiming at was Qin Feiyang and the others in the sea of reincarnation. The second grandpa had full confidence in Qin Feiyang, and the state preceptor was also full of confidence in his descendants. So this was the key to this game of chess. The result? The state preceptor smiled faintly and said, "Don't worry, the result will come out soon, and it will definitely satisfy you." The second grandpa's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he laughed and said, "It's not enough to satisfy me, it must satisfy you." "It must be so." The state preceptor laughed, but before he finished speaking, puff! Chapter 1277. At the same time, second grandpa, Lu Zheng, and the emperor all raised their heads and looked at the state preceptor with different expressions. The emperor's eyes were filled with surprise. On the other hand, second grandpa and Lu Zheng's lips curled into a smile. At this moment, second grandpa placed the chess piece in his hand somewhere on the chessboard and said with a smile, "State preceptor, this old man has won this game." The state preceptor looked down at the chessboard and found that the game that was supposed to be a sure win had turned into a dead end. I don't know if you've heard of the saying, "Come back from the jaws of death." Although you had the upper hand from the very beginning until the very end, the final victory belongs to this old man. Do you know why? Second grandpa asked with a bright smile. The state preceptor looked up and stared at him gloomily. Second grandpa picked up the chess piece that was supposed to win the game and said with a smile, "The reason is that the state preceptor is too confident and doesn't take this small chess piece seriously. But sometimes such a small chess piece is enough to stir up the universe and reverse the situation." Stir up the universe and reverse the situation. The state preceptor's face was as calm as water. He said, "You've won this game, but don't be happy too early because the real winner hasn't come yet." "I'm looking forward to it." Second Grandpa smiled. The state preceptor waved his hand hard, and the chessboard and chess pieces on the table instantly shattered. He got up and looked at the emperor, cupped his hands, and said, "Your Majesty, this old man has something to deal with, so I'll take my leave first." The emperor nodded. The state preceptor glanced at Second Grandpa, then turned around and left. Lu Zhang laughed secretly and said, "Second Grandpa, did you see that? That old thing's nose is almost crooked from anger. If the emperor wasn't here, I'm afraid he would have flipped out on the spot." Second Grandpa smiled faintly and said, "If it were you who encountered such a thing, would you be angry?" "Me. If it were me, I'm afraid I'd even destroy the imperial palace." Lu Zhang chuckled. Second Grandpa chuckled and got up to look at the emperor. He cupped his hands and said, "Your Majesty, the outcome has been decided. This old man won't disturb you." The emperor smiled and said, "Grandpa, take care. Jingji, let's go." Second Grandpa opened a portal and called out to Lu Zhang. Then he turned around and walked in. Lu Zhang glanced at the emperor, and a hint of mockery flashed in his eyes. He also entered the portal without looking back. When the portal disappeared, the smile on the emperor's face gradually disappeared and was replaced by a chill. At this moment, the commander of the Kirin army standing behind the emperor withdrew his gaze and looked at the emperor. He frowned and said, "Your Majesty, did Second Grandpa come here just to play chess with the state master?" "I don't know." The emperor shook his head. The commander of the Kirin army said, "Then why didn't your Majesty ask?" "I feel that it's not that simple." The emperor said, "Do you think they will tell me if I ask? Even if they do, can you be sure that they are telling the truth?" The commander of the Kirin army fell silent. The emperor waved his hand and said, "All right, you can leave. I want to be alone." "Yes." The commander of the Kirin army bowed and strode away. Sea of Reincarnation, above the island, a white-haired old man appeared out of thin air. It was the state master. After leaving the imperial palace, he immediately came here. Looking at the corpses all over the mountain, he could not help but clench his fists tightly. His heart was bleeding. Whoosh! He took a step and landed above the canyon. He saw that there was not even a single medicinal herb left in the huge canyon. He flew up the huge mountain and saw the statue that had been cut into pieces. His eyes were bloodshot. He suppressed the anger in his heart and opened the portal. Holding on to a trace of luck, he appeared above another island. When he saw the broken land and the remnants of the battle, he could no longer control the anger in his heart and exploded. Whoosh! With monstrous anger, he turned into a stream of light and rushed into the secret passage, heading straight for the prison. When he reached the end of the secret passage and saw the empty prison and the empty ice cellar, he almost went crazy. "Ah!" he suddenly roared, and the power of the false god rolled out. With a loud bang, the entire island was instantly torn apart and sunk into the sea. He rushed into the sky and stood at the top of the clouds, roaring, "Qin Feiyang, if I don't kill you, I, Zhuge Xinyan, am not human." Everything here had cost him more than half of his life, but in just a day it was destroyed. He could not bear it. At this moment, there was only anger and killing intent in his heart, as well as hatred for Qin Feiyang. At the same time, inside the ancient pagoda, after the battle, Wang Yangfeng and the others returned to the village to help the villagers continue to build their homes. Fatso and Lu Hong were also looking for a place to build a medicinal herb field. The Phantom Serpent Emperor went to the ancient castle. Lei Bao brought the seahorse and seal around the ancient pagoda. Qin Feiyang and the inner demons accompanied their mother to visit this magical space, laughing along the way. Time flew. In the evening, the woman stopped in the sky above the cemetery and looked at Ren Duxing's lonely grave. She asked Tian, Is this Run Duxing Run Wushuang's father? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. The woman asked suspiciously, why was he buried here? It's a long story. Qin Feiyang told her everything that had happened over the years in detail. This conversation lasted for several hours. It was late at night. The ancient pagoda was also quiet. The woman sighed. I didn't expect Mu Tianyang to be reincarnated. What about Lu Xingchen? How do you plan to deal with him? Qin Feiyang said, I will fight him sooner or later. Mu Tianyang is in existence on the same level as the late emperor. Although his strength is not as strong as before, you can't let your guard down, the woman warned. I know. Qin Feiyang nodded. It's good that you know. The woman nodded and smiled. Let's go. Accompany mother to see the people in that village. But at this moment, a series of footsteps sounded in the cemetery. It came from afar and entered the ears of the three people. The three of them quickly looked over and saw a white-haired old man walking out of a forest. He staggered towards Rin Duxing's grave. The woman asked suspiciously, Isn't he old Master Rin? Why is he here? I brought him here. After this crisis, I was worried that the state preceptor would do something to them, so I brought him here. Not only old master, but also Ren Wushuang, Yan Nanshan, Luo Chenxue, Lu Ji, and the others. Qin Feiyang smiled. The woman said, These people have helped you a lot. Qin Feiyang nodded. Very much. Without them, I wouldn't be where I am now. So I won't allow anyone to hurt them. I'm glad that you know how to repay kindness. The woman smiled. She looked at old Master Rin and pondered for a while. Then she said, Why don't you go and do your work? I'll talk to old Master Rin for a while. Qin Feiyang and the inner demons looked at each other and walked away. I'm here to see you again. Old Master Rin walked to Rin Duxing's grave and muttered to himself. Although a few days had passed, he still couldn't hide his pain. Swoosh! The woman took a step forward and landed in front of old Master Rin. She bowed slightly at Ren Duxing's grave and then looked at old Master Rin. Old Master Rin, the dead can't be brought back to life. My condolences. Old Master Rin turned to look at the woman. His expression changed immediately. He knelt on the ground and said, Greetings, Empress. I'm no longer the Empress. Old Master Rin, you don't have to be so courteous. The woman smiled and helped old Master Rin up. Then she looked at the grave and comforted him. Old Master Rin, I can understand the pain of losing a son. Back then, Tianer's cultivation was destroyed and he was expelled from the imperial capital. No one knew if he was dead or alive. I was in the same pain as you. But life has to go on. I believe that Ren Duxing wouldn't want you to be sad for him in the underworld. The woman said, Of course. This old one understands what your highness is saying. However, this old one really couldn't control himself. I also feel extremely guilty. Old Master Rin lamented. Old Master Rin, you have nothing to do with Rin Duxing's death. Why do you blame yourself? The woman was puzzled. Empress, you know that I used to be the prefecture lord of the spiritual state. As the prefecture lord, I was busy with many things every day. I even neglected this child. Because of this, he was very rebellious since he was young. He did things his own way and didn't tell me where he went. And at that time I didn't care, because in my opinion he had grown up and had his freedom. I didn't have to care so much. But because of my negligence and my connivance, he lost his life. Empress, if I had taken a little more time to care for him back then, or if I hadn't let him leave the state capital that time, these things wouldn't have been discovered, right? Old Master Rin squatted on the ground, his face full of pain and self-blame. Sigh. The woman sighed deeply and asked, Then do you know how he died? I don't know. Old Master Rin shook his head. Then do you want to know? The woman said, Old Master Rin was silent for a while. He got up and wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes. He shook his head and said, I don't dare to lie to you. At first, I wanted to know, but I could tell that Fei Yong and Shuang didn't want to tell me. I also know that they didn't want me to worry. Indeed, the woman nodded. That's why I've been thinking for the past few days. Since they all have good intentions, why should I disappoint them? Empress, I'm old. Even if I know the truth, what can I do? I can't do anything. So, it's better to retire here and let the young people deal with it themselves. This can also be considered as reducing their burden. Old Master Rin shook his head and smiled, but there was a hint of self-mockery in his eyes. The woman smiled and said, Elder Rin is right. It's the blessing of the children and grandchildren if their parents don't have to worry. Only when we're safe can they wander outside with peace of mind. Yes, so I've thought it through and won't cause trouble for them. Old Master Rin said, That's a good way of thinking. The woman nodded. What about you, Empress? After experiencing so many things, you should know how much Fei Yong wants you to be by his side. Old Master Rin said. The woman sighed and said, I'm different from you. There are some things that I have to do. I understand. Old Master Rin nodded. He was a very sophisticated person. He wouldn't ask about things that he shouldn't ask. I heard from Tian about your relationship. You're not biological grandfathers, but you're closer than that. If you have time, tell me about his performance in the spiritual state. The woman smiled. Empress, you're exaggerating. Old Master Rin shook his head and smiled. Fei Yong, this child, is amazing in the spiritual state. Then, Old Master Rin slowly told her about Qin Fei Yong's deeds in the spiritual state. The woman turned around and walked to the edge of the cliff. She listened quietly with a loving smile on her face from time to time. Occasionally there would be a faint sigh. Chapter 1278. At the same time, Qin Fei Yong and the inner demons stood above the village, glancing at the busy people below. To build a village that could accommodate tens of thousands of people was definitely a difficult task for ordinary people. It would be impossible to complete it without a few years. But don't forget, there was a large group of cultivators in the village now. For cultivators, not to mention building a village, even building a city, was a very simple matter. So now, the basic construction of the village was basically completed. Small two-story wooden buildings were arranged in a picturesque disorder, and each small wooden building had an independent small garden. In the village, the streets intersected. Each street was 20 to 30 meters wide, paved with hard blue stones, and as flat as a mirror. Although everyone had been busy for several days, everyone's face was filled with happy smiles. Sister Shuang, let's go over there. There are a lot of flowers over there. Let's go pick some and plant them in everyone's yard. By then, our village will be able to smell the fragrance of flowers everywhere. Yes, yes, yes. Let's turn the village into a sea of flowers. Suddenly, a burst of laughter entered Qin Fei Yong's ears. Qin Fei Yong followed the sound and saw a group of teenagers at the entrance of the village, surrounding a young woman, chattering nonstop. The woman looked like she was in her 20s, with an exquisite figure and a beautiful face. Her beautiful black hair fluttered in the wind, and her snow-white dress was spotless. From afar, she looked like a fairy descending to the mortal world, otherworldly. The inner demon's eyes flashed and laughed. This little girl looks really good. Why don't you just take her anyway? She is interested in you. What nonsense are you talking about? Qin Fei Yong's face darkened and said, Others don't know, but don't you know what kind of feelings I have for Ren Wuxuang? Of course I know. You treat her as your sister. But there is a good saying, don't let the fertile water flow into the fields of others. You say such a beautiful girl. If she falls into the hands of other men, wouldn't it be a pity? The inner demons said, That's enough. Don't get more and more ridiculous. Qin Feiyang glared at the inner demons and took a step forward, landing in front of Ren Wushuang. Brother Jiang Fei! Seeing Qin Feiyang appear, the group of youths immediately swarmed over, acting extremely cordial. My name is not Jiang Fei. My name is Qin Feiyang. You have to call me Brother Feiyang from now on, okay? Qin Feiyang rubbed the heads of the youths and said with a smile, Okay, Big Brother Feiyang. Big Brother Feiyang, do you have anything else to do now? If you don't have anything else to do, why don't you accompany us to pick some flowers? A little girl with a ponytail grabbed Qin Feiyang's hand and looked at Qin Feiyang expectantly. Qin Feiyang hesitated. Play with them for a while. In their hearts, you are a great hero. They worship you very much. Ren Wushuang laughed. Yes. You are our great hero. When I grow up, I want to marry Big Brother Feiyang. The little girl with a ponytail giggled and said very seriously. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He couldn't help but shake his head and laugh, saying, Okay, Big Brother will play with you for a while. Yeah. The group of children immediately cheered. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked at Ren Wushuang, saying, Sister seems to be in a good mood now. Ren Wushuang laughed and said, With this group of happy-go-lucky people around, how can she not be in a good mood? That's true. Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. These children had never experienced mutual deception and still maintained a simple and honest heart. They didn't know how to fake it, nor did they know how to play tricks. The smiles on their faces were all from the bottom of their hearts, so it was very contagious. Qin Feiyang asked, Then, when do you plan to go to the castle to cultivate? Ren Wushuang thought for a moment and said, In a few days I want to accompany grandfather again. All right. Qin Feiyang nodded. Young Master Qin, at this time, an anxious voice rang out from behind. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He stopped in his tracks and turned around to look. He saw Wang Jin running over while panting. That's great, you're finally here. Wang Jin ran in front of Qin Feiyang and said while gasping for breath, What's wrong? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Wang Jin said, Quickly go and save Shao Jie, he's about to die. What's going on? Qin Feiyang frowned. Wang Jin said, These days he has been kneeling there, not eating or drinking, and now he is completely exhausted. He's still kneeling? Qin Feiyang was shocked. That's right. I've tried to persuade him several times, but he just won't listen. Young Master Qin, he's the only child in our family. I beg you, please help him. Wang Jin knelt on the ground and begged. What nonsense. Qin Feiyang was furious. A mortal not eating or drinking for a few days. Wasn't that courting death? Shua. The next moment, he soared into the air and disappeared from everyone's sight like lightning. Interesting. High up in the sky, the inner demons laughed and followed Qin Feiyang. Big Brother Feiyang left just like that? Didn't you say that you would play with us for a while? You really don't have any integrity. The group of teenagers were unhappy. They all pouted, their faces full of displeasure. Ren Wushuang shook his head and smiled, comforting. Your Big Brother Feiyang is a great hero. Of course, he has a lot of things to do. When he's done, he will naturally come and play with you. Really? Everyone looked at Ren Wushuang doubtfully. Yes. Ren Wushuang nodded. The group of teenagers laughed happily again. They were just that simple. No matter what they said, they would believe it. This was a good thing, but also a bad thing. Because they didn't understand how sinister people were, it was fine to stay in the village, but once they left the village and went to the outside world, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. Do you want to die? In a forest. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and looked at Wang Xiaojie, his face full of anger. Wang Xiaojie's gaze trembled. He hurriedly looked up at Qin Feiyang, only to see that his lips were dry and covered in blood. His face was pale, and his eyes were dull. Seeing that haggard face, The anger in Qin Feiyang's heart couldn't help but dissipate a little. Qin Feiyang took out a healing pill and threw it to Wang Xiaojie, saying, "Eat it." "No." Wang Xiaojie shook his head. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang frowned. Wang Xiaojie said, "You haven't agreed to accept me as your disciple." His voice also sounded hoarse and weak. Qin Feiyang said, "So, as long as I don't agree, you won't eat for a day?" "Yes." Wang Xiaojie nodded. "Is it worth it? Are you really not afraid of death?" Qin Feiyang said, "I don't know. I only know that I want to cultivate. I want to become stronger, as strong as you." Wang Xiaojie said, "Swish." At this time, the inner demons came through the air and landed beside Qin Feiyang, looking at Wang Xiaojie. "Now that there are so many strong people in your village, why do you have to find us?" "You." Wang Xiaojie's eyes widened, looking at the inner demons in surprise. "How could there be two Qin Feiyang? Answer me." The inner demons shouted. Those blood-red eyes made Wang Xiaojie feel fear and said, "Because you are stronger than them." "I like to hear that, but that's not enough to move me." The inner demon snickered. "Not only are you stronger than them, you are also smarter than them. If they are soldiers, then you are generals. I don't want to be a soldier. I want to be like you, a general who controls the overall situation." Wang Xiaojie said in a sonorous voice. The inner demons was stunned and laughed. "This metaphor is interesting. Then let me ask you, do you think you are a talented general?" "Yes." Wang Xiaojie nodded without any hesitation, full of confidence. Haha, the inner demons looked at Wang Xiaojie in a daze, then suddenly laughed out loud, turned to look at Qin Feiyang and laughed. "This sovereign, I like this kid, you can accept him." Hearing this, Wang Xiaojie was overjoyed. Qin Feiyang looked at the inner demons, then lowered his head to look at Wang Xiaojie, muttering to himself. At this time, Wang Jin walked out from the nearby forest and bowed. "Young Master Qin, you have seen Xiaojie's perseverance. He truly wants to be your disciple. I hope young master can fulfill his wish." Qin Feiyang looked at Wang Jin, then at Wang Xiaojie. After a long time, he let out a long breath and landed in front of Wang Xiaojie. "Greetings, master." Wang Xiaojie hurriedly bowed. "I haven't agreed yet. Don't call me so early." Qin Feiyang said. Wang Xiaojie couldn't help but panic. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, took out a spirit stone, threw it in front of Wang Xiaojie and said, "Hold it!" Wang Xiaojie was stunned and hurriedly grabbed the spirit stone. Qin Feiyang said, "Close your eyes and meditate." "All right." Wang Xiaojie nodded, very obediently, directly closed his eyes, and began to meditate. Buzz! Not long after, the spirit stone trembled for the first time. "There's spiritual force," the inner demons muttered, and could not help but look forward to it. However, Qin Feiyang's face was expressionless. Buzz! Soon, the spirit stone trembled again. Qin Feiyang still did not have any reaction. Buzz! Next, the spirit stone trembled continuously, and the glow became more and more dazzling. The fifth tremor, the eighth tremor. When the spirit stone trembled for the 10th time, Qin Feiyang's eyes suddenly flashed. He did not expect that Wang Xiaojie's spiritual force had actually reached level 10. The inner demon smiled and said telepathically, "Is this considered an unexpected surprise?" Qin Feiyang said lightly, "It's just level 10 spiritual force. What's the big deal?" Indeed, level 10 spiritual force is nothing. However, look at the glow of the spirit stone. It doesn't show any signs of weakening. It's very obvious that his spiritual force is far more than this. The inner demons said. Qin Feiyang glanced at the spirit stone, looked at Wang Xiaojie and muttered, "I'm starting to look forward to it. You better not disappoint me." Buzz! The spirit stone was still trembling continuously. Level 11, level 13, level 15. The glow in Qin Feiyang's eyes grew brighter. Level 15 spiritual force was already considered rare and very rare. Is this considered a surprise? The inner demons laughed and said. Qin Feiyang did not answer. His gaze was firmly fixed on the spirit stone, and he could no longer hide his look of anticipation. Would this be an alchemy genius? Chapter 1279. Right then, both of them were silent. The place fell into a deathly silence. Wang Jin, who was next to him, was also looking at the spirit stone nervously. Although she did not understand why Qin Feiyang did this, she knew that this might change her brother's fate. Buzz! Finally, the spirit stone vibrated for the 16th time. This also meant that Wang Xiaojie had a level 16 mental strength. However, just as the spirit stone was vibrating, Wang Xiaojie's body also began to sway. Has he reached his limit? Qin Feiyang mumbled. However, Wang Xiaojie did not fall down. His shaking body gradually stabilized. Buzz! Soon, the spirit stone vibrated for the 17th time. The light that bloomed was extremely dazzling. Wang Jin, who was at the side, could not look straight at it. The inner demons said telepathically, level 17 mental strength. In this world, apart from you, who else can compare with him? Qin Feiyang was silent. His hands were unconsciously clenched tightly. It could be seen that at this moment his heart was not calm. Buzz! After a few breaths, the spirit stone vibrated again. Level 18 mental strength. The inner demons laughed and said, I'm about to catch up with you. You can't catch up with me, Qin Feiyang said. True enough. Before he finished his words, Wang Xiaojie's body shook violently. Then he fell to the ground, unconscious. Xiaojie! Wang Jin's expression changed. She hurried forward to hold Wang Xiaojie. Her face was full of panic. The inner demons said, Don't worry. He just overused his mental strength. Coupled with the fact that he hasn't had a drop of water these days, he fainted. Is that so? Wang Jin looked up at him. The inner demons nodded. Wang Jin heaved a sigh of relief. The inner demons turned to look at Qin Feiyang and grinned. How is it me? Qin Feiyang looked at Wang Xiaojie and let out a long sigh. He looked at Wang Jin and said, Give him to me. Give him to you. Wang Jin was stunned. The inner demons said helplessly, How can you be so stupid? My words naturally mean that I agree to accept your brother as my disciple. Wang Jin glanced at the inner demons, then looked at Qin Feiyang and asked excitedly, Young master, is this true? Qin Feiyang nodded. Thank you, young master. Wang Jin hurriedly knelt down to thank him. Qin Feiyang said, You can go back. I will get someone to take care of your brother. The moment Wang Jin heard this, his expression could not help becoming flustered. Qin Feiyang said, Are you worried that I will be like that, Master Shin? After taking your brother away, I will never see him again, right? Wang Jin nodded. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. Don't worry, I won't restrict his freedom. That's good. Wang Jin heaved a sigh of relief, and then he lowered his head to look at Wang Xiaojie as he muttered, The heavens reward those who persevere. Now that you've obtained your wish and become a disciple of the young master, you must work hard in the future and not disappoint the young master's great kindness towards you. After that, Wang Jin got up, looked up at Qin Feiyang, bowed, and said, Then I'll have to trouble young master to take care of little brother in the future. Qin Feiyang nodded. Wang Jin lowered his head to look at Wang Xiaojie, then resolutely turned around and walked towards the village. But suddenly, she stopped again, lowered her head, and there was a hint of struggle in her eyes. In the end, she summoned up her courage, turned to look at Qin Feiyang, and asked, Young Master Qin, I wonder where young Master Lu Zhang is now. Lu Zhang? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. The look in the eyes of the inner demons also became strange. Seeing that Qin Feiyang did not speak for a long time, Wang Jin's face could not help but crawl up with a trace of disappointment. He forced a smile and said, "If young master is inconvenient to tell me, then just pretend that I didn't ask." After that, he turned around and left. Qin Feiyang looked at Wang Jin's back, and his eyes could not help but reveal a trace of sympathy. He said, "Miss, wait." Wang Jin immediately stopped, turned around, and looked at Qin Feiyang expectantly. "Mississippi, there are some things, I think, that I have to make clear to you." What Lu Zheng said back then was not to convey anything, but purely to comfort you, so please don't think too much about it. Qin Feiyang said. These words were very direct. He did this for Wang Jin's sake, because Lu Zheng could not really like Wang Jin, so he had to make it clear as soon as possible to stop Wang Jin's thoughts, lest she fell deeper and deeper. Hearing Qin Feiyang's words, Wang Jin clenched her belt with both hands, and her eyes were filled with a mist. Qin Feiyang said, "I think you should have noticed that some time ago Lu Zheng has been avoiding you." "I did notice it." Wang Jin nodded. "Since you noticed it, why do you have to do this, miss? Feelings need to be consensual and can't be forced." Qin Feiyang said, "I understand. Thank you, young master." Wang Jin bowed respectfully, then turned around and left in a lonely manner. The inner demons did not speak until Wang Jin disappeared from sight. Then he turned to look at Qin Feiyang and said, "I thought you would take the opportunity to do something that would give Lu Zheng more headaches, but I didn't expect that you actually helped him solve this big problem. Some things can be joked about, but some things can't be joked about, and Wang Jin belongs to the latter." Qin Feiyang said, "I don't deny that." The inner demons nodded and then said, "Okay, the matter is almost settled. I should go back to the inner world. You take good care of mother." "Take care of mother?" Qin Feiyang looked at him suspiciously. The inner demons said, "I feel that she still has something on her mind and she may leave." Qin Feiyang immediately frowned. "Do as you see fit. If mother really leaves, we can't stop her." The inner demons shook his head, turned off the kill formula, and his consciousness returned to the inner world. "Yes, if mother wants to leave, who can stop her?" Qin Feiyang sighed with deep helplessness. Then his consciousness entered his body, picked up Wang Xiaojie, and went to the castle. "Young master, does this kid really have level 18 spiritual power?" Dan Wangkai immediately ran to Qin Feiyang and looked at Wang Xiaojie in surprise. "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. Dan Wangkai said, "Then this is a good seedling." Qin Feiyang said with a smile, "So you have to train him well." "Me?" Dan Wangkai was stunned. "Of course. Other than me, you have the highest attainment in alchemy. Who else can teach him?" Qin Feiyang said, and directly stuffed Wang Xiaojie into Dan Wangkai's hands. "Young master, are you planning to be a hands-off boss?" Dan Wangkai said helplessly. Qin Feiyang chuckled and turned to look at Wolf King and the other beasts. Ever since the time rules of the castle changed, these guys had been in seclusion every day, and their cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds. Take Wolf King, for example. How many days had it been? He had already broken through a small realm. At this speed, everyone would catch up with him soon. It seemed that after dealing with everything, he had to come to the castle to cultivate in seclusion. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and frowned slightly. "What's wrong?" Dan Wangkai looked at him suspiciously. "I forgot someone." Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed coldly, and he immediately left the castle, appearing in the sky above the village, and shouted, "Old Wang, come and see me quickly." Whoosh! Wang Yangfeng immediately rushed out of the village, landed in front of Qin Feiyang, and asked, "Young master, what's wrong?" Qin Feiyang said, "Have you seen Master Shen?" "Master Shen?" Wang Yangfeng was taken aback, thought carefully and shook his head. No. Qin Feiyang said, "Go and ask the others immediately." "Okay." Wang Yangfeng nodded, swooped down like lightning, and entered the village. After a while, he returned to Qin Feiyang, shook his head, and said, "I haven't seen Master Shin." Strange. It was the descendant of the state preceptor who saved him. How could he not be here? Qin Feiyang frowned. Wang Yangfeng asked, "Is it possible that he went to the imperial city?" "The imperial city," Qin Feiyang murmured, and his eyes flashed coldly. If he really went to the imperial city, the state preceptor should have arranged for him to enter the law enforcement hall. After that, Qin Feiyang took out the image crystal. Buzz. After a while, a shadow appeared. It was Yan Wei. Qin Feiyang asked with a smile, "How is it? Have you gained the trust of the state preceptor? How can it be so fast?" Yan Wei shook his head with a wry smile and said, "But I saw him not long ago, and I found that there was something wrong with his face." Qin Feiyang said, "It's not strange, because I wiped out his nest." "Wiped out?" Yan Wei was taken aback and asked, "Did you find your mother?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. "That's good." Yan Wei exhaled and said, "Then why are you looking for me this time?" "Help me investigate a person." Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the shadow of Master Shin emerged and said, "I suspect that he is now in the law enforcement hall. Help me investigate, and inform me as soon as you have any news. Is he an enemy or a friend?" Yan Wei glanced at Master Shin and asked. "Enemy," Qin Feiyang said, killing intent surging in his eyes. "Understood." Yan Wei nodded, and the shadow dissipated. Wang Yangfeng gave a thumbs up and said with a smile, "Young master is amazing. You actually placed a spy around the state preceptor." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Whoosh! At this time, there was a sound of something breaking through the air. Qin Feiyang turned his head and saw his mother flying towards him. "Go do your thing," Qin Feiyang said to Wang Yangfeng, and then flew towards his mother. After the two met, Qin Feiyang said with a smile, "Mother, what do you think of the old man?" The woman said, "Although the old man is not strong, his temperament is far from ordinary people." "That's true." Qin Feiyang nodded and asked, "Has he calmed down now?" "How can he let go of the pain of losing his son so easily? However, he has thought it through and is ready to stay here to enjoy his old age. As for other things, he will leave it to you young people to deal with." The woman smiled. "In fact, this is what my sister and I think. Of course, it's best that he can think it through. We don't have to persuade him anymore," Qin Feiyang said. The woman smiled, glanced at the village below, and said, "Tian, everyone here is the pillar of your future. Cherish them." "I know." Qin Feiyang nodded. The woman said, "Then let's go." Qin Feiyang was stunned and puzzled. Where to? Imperial City. Chapter 1280. What? Qin Feiyang's expression changed. Why was his mother going to the Imperial City? Was she going to return to the Violet Palace? Wasn't that like a lamb walking into a tiger's den? "Do as I say." The woman said, "Do we really have to go?" Qin Feiyang asked, his eyes full of anticipation. He really hoped that his mother would say no, but in the end, the woman didn't hesitate at all. She nodded and said, "We have to go this time." Qin Feiyang closed his eyes in pain. A moment later, he opened his eyes and looked at the woman. "Since mother insists on going, I'll accompany you whether dead or alive." "Tian, why do you have to do this?" The woman sighed deeply. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, "I've made up my mind. If you don't let me accompany you, I won't send you out even if you beat me to death." "You." The woman shook her head and smiled helplessly. "All right, you can accompany me." A smile finally appeared on Qin Feiyang's face, and he secretly swore, "Although, He didn't know why his mother insisted on going to the imperial city. This time, no one could hurt his mother. Let's go. The woman smiled. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. With a wave of his hand, he left the ancient pagoda with the woman and appeared in the sky above the island. The imperial tutor was here. The woman immediately raised her eyebrows and scanned the void around. The imperial tutor, Qin Feiyang, was shocked. He quickly closed his eyes and sensed carefully. As expected, he sensed the imperial tutor's aura in the void. Why didn't I sense that he was here at all? Qin Feiyang was bewildered. The woman thought for a moment and said, he should be in the ancient pagoda. He can't hear what's going on outside. Qin Feiyang was stunned. During this period of time, he had been busy running around for his mother and the villagers. He really didn't pay attention to this problem. There are different levels of space divine items. It is said that the top space divine items can not only accommodate all things but also travel through time and space. As for the lowest grade spatial divine items, they can only store objects and have no other functions. Of course, even if it's the lowest level spatial divine item, it's still a divine item. It's not something an ordinary cosmos sac can compare to. The woman smiled. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, Mother, do you mean that this ancient pagoda is only the lowest level spatial divine object? Yes, the woman nodded. But that's not right. If this ancient pagoda is just a spatial divine object of the lowest level, then Lu Xingqian and Ren Duxing shouldn't care so much. But last time, for the sake of this ancient pagoda, Ren Duxing did not hesitate to sacrifice his own life. This is clearly unusual, Qin Feiyang said. The woman was stunned and asked, What did Ren Duxing say to you? Qin Feiyang thought for a while and said, he said that he was the original owner of this ancient pagoda and that he only wanted to take back what belonged to him. It's his, the woman pondered for a while and said with a smile. Seems like there's only one explanation. What explanation? Qin Feiyang was curious. The woman smiled faintly and said, this ancient pagoda might have some special meaning to him. Special meaning? Qin Feiyang frowned and suddenly thought of the ancient castle. He asked, is there a possibility that this ancient pagoda is in a sealed state like the ancient castle? It's hard to say. Perhaps there's such a possibility, the woman said. Forget it. Let's not think about it. It's useless to think about this kind of thing. Qin Feiyang shook his head and opened a portal. He smiled and said, Mother, let's go. The woman nodded. Qin Feiyang stepped into the portal. The woman followed. However, she stopped in front of the portal and did not enter. Qin Feiyang's figure disappeared into the portal in the blink of an eye. Tian, or I'm sorry, Mother lied to you again, the woman murmured, her eyes full of reluctance and guilt. Then she opened the portal and left without looking back. Imperial City. Outside the city, above the Black Dragon Pool, Qin Feiyang appeared out of thin air and glanced at the Black Dragon Pool that was unrecognizable. He shook his head and said with a smile, Mother, do you know? Every time I come to Imperial City, this is the first place I pass by. This has already become a place I have to pass by. He did not notice that his mother did not follow him. Mother. He did not hear his mother's reply for a long time. He frowned slightly and turned around suspiciously. Immediately, his expression changed. Where was his mother? Could it be? Qin Feiyang panicked and hurriedly opened the portal and returned to the sky above the island. Qin Feiyang's expression turned lifeless as he looked at the empty space. He finally understood what was going on. His mother wanted to go to Imperial City. It was just a pretense. Mother, why is that? I'm no longer the ignorant child from back then. I can help you. What's on your mind? Can you tell me? I don't want you to bear it alone. He roared into the sky. The inner demons were right. If his mother wanted to leave, he could not stop her. Sigh. With a long sigh, the inner demons appeared beside Qin Feiyang and said, I didn't expect that Mother would use such a method to send you away. I was too careless. Even if I see through it this time, Mother will continue to find opportunities. With Mother's mind, I can't stop her at all. Her departure is a matter of time. I just don't understand. What is it that she has to hide from me? Qin Feiyang clenched his fist so tightly that his palms had turned white. Mother must have a reason for hiding it from you. Perhaps she has other plans. Don't be sad. Sooner or later, we will find her again. The inner demons patted Qin Feiyang's shoulder and comforted him. Qin Feiyang looked up at the endless sea and sighed. She's already gone. What else can I say? But, speaking of which, Qin Feiyang's temperament suddenly changed. He was like an unsheathed, peerless sword, exuding an astonishing sharpness. But what? The inner demons said in surprise, "The grievances that Mother suffered in the imperial palace, I'm going to help her get revenge. And today is also the day that I, Qin Feiyang, officially returned to the imperial capital." Qin Feiyang said word by word. "Officially returned to the imperial capital," the inner demons murmured and asked, "Are you sure? You should know that you are still a wanted criminal. Whoever has the ability, come and try to catch me." Qin Feiyang smiled coldly. "Haha, domineering, I support you. If you need, call me out. Let's join hands and turn this imperial capital upside down." The inner demons laughed loudly and returned to the inner world with a monstrous, murderous aura. Qin Feiyang immediately opened the portal, but this time, he was not going to the Black Dragon Pool. It was the gate of the imperial capital. This time, he was going to openly step into the city that had once made him despair and hate. And all these years, this was also the first time that he had openly entered the city through the gate. He wanted to let everyone know that he, Qin Feiyang, was back. Chapter 1281. Imperial City. There were at least 1 million people going in and out of the Imperial City every day. And that was just a conservative estimate. East Gate, for invincible Black Army soldiers, stood straight. On the city wall, there was a sentry every 3 steps and a sentry every 7 steps. The city was heavily guarded. Even a fly wouldn't be able to get in. Qin Feiyang's wanted poster was pasted on the wall next to the city gate. The portrait on it was so realistic that people could recognize him at a glance. However, even without the portrait, people could still recognize Qin Feiyang. After all, Qin Feiyang's name was already known by everyone. In front of the city gate, thousands of people lined up in a long line to be interrogated by the invincible Black Army. This was Imperial City. No one dared to be presumptuous in front of the invincible Black Army. Whoosh! Suddenly, a white figure appeared out of thin air above the city. It was a young man who was about 23 years old. He was more than one, 8 meters tall, and wore a white robe. Although his robe was old, it was clean and neat. He stood in the air with his black hair fluttering in the wind. His dark eyes were like 2 stars shining brightly. His aura was unfathomable. On the city wall, sensing the aura of the newcomer, an invincible Black Army soldier holding a halberd shouted, "Who are you? How dare you come to the city gate? Go down and be interrogated." However, when he saw the face of the newcomer, his body suddenly trembled. "It's him, Qin Feiyang." In an instant, the city was in an uproar. The neat and orderly order was also directly broken. Whether it was the invincible Black Army soldiers or the crowd in front of the city gate, they all looked up at Qin Feiyang with shock in their eyes. How dare he come to Imperial City so openly? Didn't he know that the Emperor was looking for him? Qin Feiyang stood proudly in the air and scanned the city. Finally, he looked at the invincible Black Army soldier and said indifferently, "Who gave you the courage to shout at me?" The invincible Black Army soldier trembled and his eyes were filled with fear. "Answer me," Qin Feiyang said. His eyes were as cold as the edge of a blade. He gave everyone a sense of oppression as heavy as Mount Tai. The Black Body Army member stammered and panicked to the extreme. Finally, he knelt on the ground and kowtowed to beg for mercy. Qin Feiyong smiled contemptuously and raised his head to look in the direction of the imperial palace. A cold light flashed in his eyes. He then stepped out and entered the sky above the city. He walked slowly, step by step, but no one dared to stop him. At this moment, it was as if he was the return of an emperor. His formless emperor's aura roared through the sky, making everyone tremble in fear. What is he trying to do? People looked at him in confusion. Right now, the emperor was looking for this person. Logically speaking, he should have gone into hiding. But now he had brazenly returned to the imperial capital. Did he have anything to rely on? Boom! Suddenly, somewhere in the city below, several powerful emperor auras erupted. Whoosh! 5 middle-aged men soared into the sky and stood in front of Qin Feiyong. How dare you? Do you think you can step into the imperial city? If you know what's good for you, surrender immediately. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. They all had the cultivation of a combat emperor, ranging from 1 star to 3 star. Qin Feiyong did not stop. As he walked toward the 5 of them, he chuckled and said, "Do you mean that I, Qin Feiyong, am not qualified to step into the imperial city?" "That's right," one of them sneered. "Although I am no longer a prince, the power of the late emperor's bloodline flows in my body. And what do you have? You are just a bunch of clowns who want to take me to receive rewards. Do you think you are qualified to show off in front of me? Kneel down!" Qin Feiyong roared. The emperor's aura surged out and enveloped all directions. The 5 of them trembled. Deep in their hearts, there was a surge of horror and fear that could not be dissipated. What a terrifying emperor's aura! The 5 of them were shocked. Their legs went soft and trembled. In the end, they knelt in the void uncontrollably, lowering their proud heads as their bodies trembled. The emperor's aura on his body is too terrifying. I seem to have seen an emperor descending. The people in the city below were all shocked. Putting everything else aside, in terms of boldness and courage, this man was definitely the best candidate to be the next emperor. Qin Feiyong walked step by step to the front of the 5 of them. He stopped and looked down at them condescendingly. Feeling the oppressive emperor's aura, the 5 of them were terrified to the extreme. Their bodies were drenched in cold sweat. Qin Feiyong said indifferently, "Now answer me. Do I, Qin Feiyong, have the right to set foot in the imperial city?" "Yes, yes, yes." The 5 of them nodded repeatedly. Qin Feiyong glanced at the 5 of them, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Clang! The saint-level weapon, Ice Blade, appeared. He grabbed the ice blade and swung it down. The 5 of them were beheaded, and their blood dyed the sky red. He killed people in public in the imperial city. The people were dumbfounded. The invincible Black Army, standing on the city wall, also trembled and kept quiet out of fear. Killing people in public in the imperial city was a crime of treason and death without mercy. This man must be crazy. Otherwise, he would not have done such a stupid thing. However, Qin Feiyong did not care at all. He glanced at the 5 corpses and lowered his head to look at the people in the city below. He said, "Even if I, Qin Feiyong, am not a prince, I am not someone you can offend. Do you understand?" "Yes, yes," the people nodded repeatedly. That cold gaze, that disdainful attitude, that monarch-like aura made everyone tremble. Qin Feiyong withdrew his gaze and continued to walk toward the imperial palace. On the city wall, after Qin Feiyong walked far away, one of the invincible Black Army shouted, "Hurry up and inform all the commanders that Qin Feiyong is here to invade!" Boom! However, before he could finish his sentence, a red sword energy rolled over from afar and instantly drowned the invincible Black Army. Screams resounded through the sky. Even if you inform the emperor, I don't care. But don't be so loud. It will spoil my mood. Then, Qin Feiyang's cold voice came from afar. He killed a 9-star battle saint from such a long distance. What a powerful move! The rest of the invincible Black Army looked at the figure that was about to disappear from their sight and could not help but feel cold. One of the invincible Black Army suddenly came back to his senses and transmitted his voice. Don't just stand there. Hurry up and send the message. The rest of the people woke up and immediately took out their image crystals. What? Qin Feiyang is back? He killed people in public. Did he eat a leopard's guts? How dare he cause trouble in the imperial city? The news quickly reached the ears of the various commanders. Not only the invincible Black Army, but the people in the city were also spreading the news. 1 spread to 10. 10 spread to 100. After a while, the news that Qin Feiyang was here spread through the streets and alleys. Everyone knew about it, and their expressions changed. Imperial Palace, Bright Sky Palace. The emperor and empress were sitting in a pavilion and listening to the little prince recite a poem. Their faces were full of smiles. Report. Suddenly, a shout was heard. A middle-aged strong man in golden armor hurriedly flew through the air and landed in front of the pavilion. This person, he was the newly appointed invincible Black Army commander. The emperor raised his eyebrows and said angrily, "What's the fuss?" "Your Majesty, Empress, Qin Feiyang is back," the strong man in golden armor shouted. What? The Empress's expression changed. The emperor also stood up suddenly. "Where is my brother? Tell me quickly. I want to play with him." However, the little prince looked at the strong man in golden armor excitedly. The strong man in golden armor did not know how to answer. He looked at the emperor for help. The emperor turned to look at the empress and said in a deep voice, "Take Tian'er back to the palace and watch over him. Don't let him run out." "Yes," the empress replied. She carried the little prince and hurried to the palace not far away. "Father, mother, I don't want to go back to the palace. I want to play with my brother." "Put me down," the little prince struggled. However, the empress would not let go no matter what. Because Qin Feiyang's previous methods had left a huge shadow in her heart. She only wanted to use one word to describe Qin Feiyang: demon. After the empress brought the little prince into the palace, the emperor looked away and asked the strong man in golden armor, "When did he come back?" "Not long ago," the strong man in golden armor said. The emperor asked, "Who else is there besides him?" "Just him alone. And as soon as he came back, he started a massacre in the imperial city. He doesn't take your Majesty seriously at all." The strong man in golden armor said angrily, "When has he ever taken me seriously?" The emperor snorted and said, "Go find him now and ask him to come to the imperial palace." What? The strong man in golden armor's expression changed. He said anxiously, "Your Majesty, you can't do that. Qin Feiyang's strength is not what it used to be. Asking him to come to the imperial palace is tantamount to inviting a wolf into the house." Humph! In the imperial palace, it's not his turn to be rampant. The emperor said. The strong man in golden armor wanted to say something. "Enough. Do as I say immediately. Moreover, even if I don't ask him to come, he will come himself. So, instead of letting him wreak havoc in the city, it's better to bring him directly to the imperial palace." The emperor said in a deep voice. The strong man in golden armor said, "I understand. I'll go right away." The emperor said, "Also be polite to him. I don't want to see anyone die in his hands." The strong man in golden armor froze and said hurriedly, "Your Majesty, he treated you like this, and you want me to be polite to him? Aren't you being too merciful?" The emperor said angrily, "Do what I tell you to do. What's with the nonsense?" "Yes, Your Majesty." The strong man in golden armor's eyes trembled. He bowed and replied quickly, Then he turned into a stream of light and tore through the sky like lightning. At the same time, the temple. Lord Imperial Tutor, bad news. Yan Wei hurriedly ran to the front of a courtyard and shouted. The door opened, and the Imperial Tutor stood at the door. He looked at Yan Wei and frowned. "What's wrong?" Yan Wei said. "I just received news that Qin Feiyang is back." "What? He dares to come back? Where is he now?" The moment he heard the words Qin Feiyang, the Imperial Tutor's killing intent burst out uncontrollably. Yan Wei said, "He's heading towards the first district. Courting death." The Imperial Tutor smiled coldly. He took a step and disappeared from Yan Wei's sight. Chapter 1282. Let's talk about Qin Feiyang. At this moment, he had already left the 10th district and entered the 9th district. Although the people in the imperial city knew about his methods, there were still many people who jumped out to block his path in front of the tempting reward. There was no lack of powerful combat emperors among them. There were even some who used unscrupulous means to capture Qin Feiyang. For example, ambushes, sneak attacks, poisoning. However, no matter how many people there were, no matter what they did, they were all killed by Qin Feiyang. Now, the number of people who died in his hands should have reached 3 digits. "Qin Feiyang, give me your life." Not long after entering the 9th district, more than 10 combat emperors rushed into the sky with murderous intent. The strongest among them was a 4-star combat emperor. An ant should have the awareness of an ant. What can and can't be touched? Qin Feiyang said coldly. Boom! The soaring dragon art was activated. His cultivation level instantly soared to a 2-star combat emperor. Immediately, he formed a seal with both hands, and the divine dragon seal instantly appeared. It was as huge as a mountain and carried a monstrous divine aura as it charged towards the group of people. Ah, there was no suspense. More than 10 people died on the spot, and blood stained the sky. Situations like this could happen at any time. Finally, Qin Feiyang came to the front of the 8th district city wall. On top of the city wall, a group of invincible black armies stood upright, each of them emitting an extremely powerful aura. The 10 people in the lead were wearing light golden armor, and their aura was even more terrifying. They were the various deputy commanders of the invincible Black Army. Their cultivation level was at least a 3-star combat emperor. One of them said, "Qin Feiyang, the imperial city is not a place where you can behave atrociously. Quickly surrender." "If I say no, what do you want?" Qin Feiyang still did not stop. He walked towards them step by step, his eyes cold and piercing. Another deputy commander's face turned cold and said, "If you have the confidence to defeat all of us here, you can come and try." "Defeat? You make it sound a little too easy. Anyone who dares to stand in the way of Qin Feiyang, no matter who they are, has only one ending, death." Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the thunder leopard appeared. He said indifferently, "Don't leave a single one alive. Kill them all." "Understood." Lei Bao chuckled, and the power of thunder roared out, turning into a huge wave that swept across the sky and drowned those people in an instant. Ah! Miserable screams resounded through the heavens and earth. 9-star monarch beast. At this moment, a beam of golden light pierced through the air and landed not far away. It looked at Lei Bao and Qin Feiyang in shock. It was the golden-armored man. What? 9-star monarch beast. How is this possible? Why would a dignified 9-star monarch beast listen to Qin Feiyang? Everyone turned pale with fright. Their faces were filled with disbelief. When the lightning power dissipated, none of the vice commanders and the invincible Black Army were still alive. They had all died. Not even a single strand of hair was left. To this, Qin Feiyang didn't take another look, and directly landed in front of the golden-armored man. Lei Bao followed closely behind him, and his murderous aura surged to the sky. No wonder you dare to break into the Imperial City so brazenly. It turns out that you have a 9-star monarch beast by your side. However, if you think you can do whatever you want in the Imperial City by relying on a 9-star monarch beast, then you are gravely mistaken. The golden-armored man came back to his senses and took a deep breath. He stared at Qin Feiyang and sneered. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, "You don't have to worry about whether I can do whatever I want. On the other hand, looking at your attire, you should be the new commander of the invincible Black Army, right?" "That's right," the golden-armored man said. Qin Feiyang said, "Then you should also know that the 2 commanders before you died miserably." "So what?" The golden-armored man sneered. "I remember that the first commander of the invincible Black Army became a ghost under my blade on the day the Emperor ordered me to be executed. And the second commander of the invincible Black Army died in the Butterfly Valley when he went to the spiritual state to hunt me down. Although I didn't kill him with my own hands, he died because of me." Qin Feiyang laughed. "Of course I know. However, can their strength be compared to mine?" The golden-armored man smiled disdainfully, and his aura suddenly erupted. It was a 9-star combat emperor. Qin Feiyang said in realization, "So it's a 9-star combat emperor. No wonder you dare to be so arrogant." The golden-armored man raised his nose to the sky and said arrogantly, "So you better be honest with me, or this day next year will be the anniversary of your death." "The anniversary of my death," Qin Feiyang murmured. He chuckled and said, "Then do you know why I mentioned those 2 former commanders?" "Why?" The golden-armored man frowned. Qin Feiyang said, "I mentioned them because I want to ask you, how do you want to die?" Arrogant. The golden-armored man was furious and shouted, "It seems that if I don't teach you a lesson, you won't know how high the sky is and how deep the earth is." Boom! He took a step forward and charged toward Qin Feiyang with monstrous killing intent. "You don't know how to live." Lei Bao laughed ferociously. "Don't worry, let him continue to jump. The higher he jumps, the more painful it will be when he falls." Qin Feiyang laughed and transmitted his voice to Lei Bao. "I'll listen to you." Lei Bao laughed secretly, and a trace of mockery flashed in his fierce eyes. "Why aren't you fighting back? Are you afraid?" The golden-armored man was even more proud when he saw that the man and beast were not moving. His face was full of contempt. "Yes, we were scared out of our wits when you unleashed your power. How would we dare to fight back? Why don't we talk about it? If you let us go, we will immediately leave the imperial capital." Lei Bao said, "It's too late." The golden-armored man smiled coldly and rushed in front of Qin Feiyang. He slapped Qin Feiyang's face. That's right. He wanted to take the opportunity to humiliate Qin Feiyang. Although Qin Feiyang was no longer a prince, he was still a well-known figure. If he slapped him in public, he would definitely be famous in the 9 states. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but laugh and said, "Little bastard, this is the result of going against us." He had already imagined the scene of everyone cheering for him when he slapped him. However, just as his palm was only 0.01 millimeters away from Qin Feiyang's face, Qin Feiyang took a step back. At the same time, a group of people appeared in front of him. It was Wang Yangfeng and the others, a total of 18 9-star combat emperors. As soon as Wang Yangfeng and the others appeared, they immediately pounced on the golden-armored man with Lei Bao. It was too late for the golden-armored man to escape. Ah, that shrill scream immediately resounded through the clouds. Lei Bao instantly crippled the golden-armored man's qi. Then he retreated to Qin Feiyang's side and cursed loudly. "Damn it, who asked you to be arrogant? Beat him up. Beat him up hard." Wang Yangfeng and the others looked at each other and smiled. They immediately surrounded him and punched and kicked him mercilessly. In less than 3 breaths, the golden-armored man's face was swollen like a pig's head. There was no place on his body that was intact. Blood flowed out. "I was wrong. Your Highness, I was blind. I beg you, please be merciful and let me go," he repeatedly cried out, his heart filled with regret. Originally, the emperor had asked him to invite Qin Feiyang to the imperial palace. Before he left, he had specially instructed him to be polite to Qin Feiyang. However, when he came here and saw Qin Feiyang's arrogant attitude, he was displeased. Therefore, he used his status and strength to suppress the other party's arrogance. However, he did not expect that Qin Feiyang had so many 9-star combat emperors hidden around him. He failed to go for wool and came home shorn. Back down. A moment later, Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Wang Yangfeng and the others retreated to the side. Qin Feiyang's emperor's aura surged and imprisoned the golden-armored man in the void. Then he strode in front of the golden-armored man and said with a smile, "To be honest, I really don't know how high the sky is or how deep the earth is. Can you tell me?" I didn't think before I spoke those words. I didn't choose my words carefully. Your Highness, I really know I was wrong. You're a magnanimous person. Can you not be so calculative with me? The burly man hurriedly knelt in the void, kowtowing and begging with a face full of panic. Qin Feiyang joked, "Didn't you call me a little bastard before?" No, I called myself a bastard. I deserve to die 1,000 times. Your Highness, please be merciful and spare my worthless life. The burly man begged with tears streaming down his face. Qin Feiyang smiled coldly and looked at Wang Yangfeng. "Take him to the imperial palace." "Yes." Wang Yangfeng nodded and picked up the burly man as if he was a little chick. She followed Qin Feiyang and continued to walk toward the imperial palace. This is the imperial capital. It's so prosperous. Whether it was Lei Bao, Wang Yangfeng, or the others, it was their first time in the imperial capital. They all looked down curiously. The temple, in a certain alchemy room. "Greetings, Lord." Wan Qiu stood respectfully in front of Lu Xingchen. Lu Xingchen nodded and said, "Why did you come to see me all of a sudden?" Wan Qiu said, "I received news that Qin Feiyang has returned." Lu Xingchen was stunned for a moment, then shook his head and said with a smile, "It's all within my expectations, but he came earlier than I expected." "Within your expectations?" Wan Qiu was surprised. This time he subdued a large number of experts in the sea of reincarnation. His strength soared countless times overnight. If it were me, I would also take this opportunity to officially return to the imperial capital. Lu Xingchen said, "Officially return?" Wan Qiu was stunned and said in surprise, "Does Lord mean that he won't leave this time?" Lu Xingchen said, "That's definitely his plan, but there are also people who won't let him get what he wants." "Is Lord referring to the state preceptor?" Wan Qiu asked. "Of course it's him. Go and take a look. If there's anything, report to me immediately. But remember, you must hide your identity well, because Qin Feiyang hasn't given up on killing you. If he finds out, you'll definitely die." Lu Xingchen reminded, "I understand. I'll be careful." Wan Qiu responded respectfully, then turned and quickly left the alchemy room. "Qin Feiyang, I'm afraid it won't be that easy for you to return as the king, but I'm still looking forward to it." Chapter 1283. Today's imperial city was destined to not be peaceful. Inner city, Zhugewu Manor. A purple-clothed young man was walking alone in a garden, admiring the beautiful scenery while reciting poems. His figure was tall and straight, his face was like jade, and he held a folding fan in his hand, looking very elegant. That's right, this person was Zhuge Mingyang. Suddenly, 2 guards ran past the garden in a hurry. "Stop!" Zhuge Mingyang looked at the two of them and shouted, "Greetings, young master." The two guards hurriedly stopped and stood in the distance, bowing in salute. "What's the matter? Why are you in such a hurry?" Zhuge Mingyang asked. "Nothing. I still have something to do, so I won't disturb young master." The two guards looked at each other and hurriedly shook their heads. Then they ran away in a panic. Zhuge Mingyang raised his eyebrows, took a step forward, and stood in front of the two guards and said, "You must be hiding something from me. Say it." "No, really." The two of them waved their hands. "Do you want to die?" Zhuge Mingyang's eyes turned cold. Plop! The two guards immediately knelt on the ground and said, "Young master, it's not that we don't want to say it, but the Marquis told us not to tell you. Please don't make things difficult for us, okay?" "I won't make things difficult for you. But those who don't listen, I will kill them without mercy," Zhuge Mingyang said. The two guards shuddered. "Say it," Zhuge Mingyang shouted. The two of them looked at each other, gritted their teeth, and said, "It's Qin Feiyang, he's back." Crack! Hearing the three words Qin Feiyang, Zhuge Mingyang's temperament suddenly changed, and his whole body was filled with a terrifying aura. The folding fan in his hand was crushed into pieces. "Where is he? Why did father ask you to hide it from me?" Zhuge Mingyang said in a deep voice, "We don't know where Qin Feiyang is, but we heard that he's heading toward the first district. As for why Master Ho didn't tell you, it was because he was worried that you would seek revenge on Qin Feiyang." The two guards replied. Zhuge Mingyang said, "Father, do you think I'm no match for Qin Feiyang?" The two guards looked at each other, not daring to answer directly. Zhuge Mingyang clenched his fists. Although the two guards didn't say it explicitly, his father's intention was clear. Seeing Zhuge Mingyang's gloomy expression and his silence, the two guards felt uneasy. In the end, Zhuge Mingyang loosened his grip and waved his hand. "You may leave." "Yes." The two of them heaved a sigh of relief and quickly got up and ran away. "Father, I know you're doing this for my own good, but the enmity of the past is absolutely irreconcilable. If I don't find Qin Feiyang to settle this, I'm afraid I won't be able to get rid of this shadow for the rest of my life, so I have to find him." Zhuge Mingyang looked at the sky and muttered to himself, his eyes flashing with a touch of pain. Since the moment he was forced to kneel by Qin Feiyang, his heart had never been at peace, and the hatred in his heart had never dissipated. Crack! Suddenly, he clenched his fists again. The pain in his eyes disappeared and was replaced by a trace of coldness. "Qin Feiyang, although you're getting stronger, I'm also getting stronger. This time, I won't lose to you again." Whoosh! Zhuge Mingyang rose into the air and disappeared in the sky above the inner city like lightning. Did you know? Qin Feiyang is back. Qin Feiyang? He's wanted everywhere now. How could he possibly come back? It's absolutely true. And I heard that he's about to kill his way to the first district. It can't be if he comes back now. Isn't it the same as sending himself to death? Wrong. This time he brought 18 9-star combat emperors and a 9-star emperor beast. His cultivation has also broken through to the combat emperor level. Fuck! Why is he so abnormal? He broke through to the combat emperor level so quickly. How are we going to live? Let's go and watch the show. Every time this person comes back, the Imperial City will be in chaos. This time will be no exception. The disciples of the temple received the news one by one and rushed to the first district. No way! Qin Feiyang actually dares to return to the Imperial City? Is he borrowing courage from the heavens? Hurry, hurry, hurry. Let's go to the Imperial City immediately. We can't miss this good show. Other than the Imperial City, there were many other cities of various sizes in the Imperial City. Without exception, those who received the news immediately put down their work and rushed to the Imperial City. In short, at this moment, half of the people in the entire Imperial City were rushing to the Imperial City. This scene was even grander than the ascension of an emperor. The Imperial City, Between each district, there was a city wall separating them. Between the first district and the second district, there was no exception. At this moment, above the city wall, more than a dozen figures stood side by side. The leader was the imperial tutor. Yan Wei stood behind him. The rest of the people were the commander of the Kirin army and the deputy commanders of the Kirin army. Everyone looked at the void in the distance, except for the imperial tutor. Their faces were heavy as if they were facing a great enemy. Qin Feiyang, what are you trying to do by causing such a big commotion? The commander of the Kirin army murmured, his head aching. One of the deputy commanders looked at the void behind them and said in a low voice, "Commander, there are more and more people. If we fight with Qin Feiyang later, I'm afraid innocent people will be affected. Should we send people to evacuate in advance?" The commander of the Kirin army turned his head to look. The void behind him was dark and could only be described as a sea of people. There were ordinary people. There were disciples of wealthy families. There were also disciples of the divine halls. The commander of the Kirin army frowned and sighed. There are too many people. It's too late to evacuate now. Then what should we do? The deputy commanders couldn't help but have a headache. The commander of the Kirin army said, "What else can we do? Try not to fight later if we can." Yan Wei said disdainfully, "Why are you so worried? Don't you see the imperial tutor here? With the imperial tutor's strength, it's easy for him to deal with Qin Feiyang. Do you have the right to speak here?" The commander of the Kirin army's face turned cold. Yan Wei said, "I'm just telling the truth. With the imperial tutor here, there's no need to worry about everyone's safety." One of the deputy commanders said, "We all know the imperial tutor's strength, but Qin Feiyang is not an ordinary person. We have to take precautions. There's no what if." Yan Wei said. The deputy commander's face was suddenly filled with anger, and he was about to quarrel. Cough, cough. The commander of the Kirin army saw that the situation was not good. He quickly coughed and transmitted a message to the deputy commander. "This person is the imperial tutor's lackey. Don't waste your breath on him." The deputy commander heard this and looked at the imperial tutor's back view. He chose to endure it. "He's here." Suddenly, someone in the crowd cried out in surprise. Everyone immediately looked at the void in front of them and saw a white figure approaching from afar. It gradually entered everyone's line of sight. It's really Qin Feiyang. He didn't even try to hide it. He's openly provoking the emperor. Look, there's a leopard beside him. No way, that's actually a thunder leopard. Thunder leopards are born with the ability to control the power of thunder and lightning. Its lethality is extremely terrifying. How did he subdue it? And the 18-9 star combat emperors behind him, where did he find them? This is unbelievable. The current Qin Feiyang, I'm afraid even the major Marshal Marquis government wouldn't dare to be presumptuous in front of him. Everyone was shocked and discussed animatedly. He's finally here. The imperial tutor murmured as murderous intent surged in his eyes. Young lord were a little nervous. At the same time, Lei Bao, Wang Yangfeng, and the others also noticed the imperial tutor and the others. Facing a fake god, they couldn't help but feel nervous. What are you afraid of? As long as Zhuge Shinfeng is in my hands, he won't dare to do anything to us. Qin Feiyang sneered. The reason why he dared to openly return to the imperial city was because of Zhuge Shinfeng as a bargaining chip. Soon, Qin Feiyang led Lei Bao, Wang Yangfeng, and the others to the front of the city wall. Stop! Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Lei Bao, Wang Yangfeng, and the others stopped in unison. The commander of the Kirin army immediately transmitted a message. Qin Feiyang, what are you doing? Aren't you courting death by coming back with such fanfare? Don't worry, I'll be fine. Qin Feiyang glanced at the commander of the Kirin army discreetly and responded before looking at the imperial tutor. The imperial tutor was also looking at him. The moment their eyes met, everyone present couldn't help but have an illusion that time seemed to have stopped. "Ha!" Qin Feiyang suddenly laughed and said, "The dignified imperial tutor actually came to welcome me personally. I'm really flattered." "Ha!" The imperial tutor also laughed and said, "Who in the great Qin Empire doesn't know the name Qin Feiyang? It's my honor to come and welcome you." "The imperial tutor is really modest," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "It's good to be modest," the imperial tutor said with a smile. The two of them talked and laughed as if they were two old friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time. Everyone was dumbfounded. What exactly were these two people up to? But some people knew that this was just a moment of calm before the storm. The imperial tutor's eyes flashed, and he said with a smile, "Little brother, it's rare for us to meet. Why don't we find a place to talk in private?" "That's my intention, but I don't have time now," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Yan Wei took a step forward, looked at Qin Feiyang and shouted, "Lord State Preceptor personally invited you. That's your good fortune from your previous life. Don't be so shameless." Qin Feiyang looked at Yan Wei and said indifferently, "Who are you? Are you qualified to speak here?" Of course, he knew that this person was Yan Wei. He also knew that Yan Wei was so eager to stand up for the imperial tutor because he wanted to show his loyalty to the imperial tutor and gain the imperial tutor's trust. He naturally had to fulfill his wish. Yan Wei said in a deep voice, "Who I am is not important. What's important is that you can't refuse the imperial tutor's invitation." Swish! Qin Feiyang took a step forward and instantly landed in front of Yan Wei. His eyes flashed with a cold light and said, "If you have the ability, say it again." Yan Wei swallowed his saliva. The imperial tutor didn't make any statement. He just looked at Yan Wei silently. This is a good opportunity. Yan Wei glanced at the imperial tutor from the corner of his eyes. He suddenly straightened his back and stared into Qin Feiyang's eyes, saying, "I said you can't refuse the imperial tutor's invitation." Finished. He hurriedly sent a sound transmission to Qin Feiyang. "Give me a slap with all your strength. Then bear with it." Chapter 1284. But just as Qin Feiyang's slap was about to hit Yan Wei's face, a terrifying divine power rushed out of the imperial preceptor's body. Qin Feiyang was immediately imprisoned in the void. The imperial preceptor looked at Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, "You have to look at the owner before beating a dog. You slapped him in public. What do you think of me? Then you should properly teach him when he should interrupt and when he shouldn't." Qin Feiyang snorted coldly, but he was laughing in his heart. The fact that the imperial preceptor would protect Yan Wei was enough to show that the imperial preceptor had gradually trusted him. "I will teach him. But you, what do you want to do this time?" The imperial preceptor said. Qin Feiyang said, "Let go of your pressure first. It will make me very uncomfortable." "It's better to be uncomfortable than to lose your life," the imperial preceptor said with a smile, not hiding the threat. "That's true." Qin Feiyang nodded. The imperial preceptor said, "Then say it." Everyone present also held their breath at this moment, waiting for Qin Feiyang's answer, because they were also very curious about the reason why Qin Feiyang wanted to return to the imperial city despite the emperor's arrest warrant. Qin Feiyang looked at the imperial preceptor and said with a smile, "Then you listen to me." After that, he glanced at the commander of the Kirin army and the others and said loudly, "You also prick up your ears and listen to me. Today, I, Qin Feiyang, will officially return to the imperial city." Qin Feiyang said word by word, sonorous and powerful, like a great bell, echoing over the entire imperial city. This was his declaration, a declaration to the imperial preceptor, a declaration to the emperor, a declaration to the people of the imperial city. He, Qin Feiyang, was back. No one could stop him. No one could drive him out of the imperial city. It turns out that he came back this time to announce his official return to the imperial city in public. The emperor is looking for him, but he chose to come back at this time. It's obvious that he is deliberately going against the emperor. His words shocked everyone in all directions. The imperial city directly burst into an uproar. This man was openly challenging the emperor and provoking the imperial power. Your Majesty, bright palace. The chief eunuch cut across the sky like lightning and landed in front of the emperor. What? The emperor frowned and looked at him. The head eunuch said, Qin Feiyang made a declaration in front of everyone. Today he will officially return to the imperial city. Bastard! The emperor flew into a rage and said, He really doesn't put me in his eyes at all. The chief eunuch said, That's right. Isn't this clearly against your Majesty? What about the commander of the Black Army? Didn't we ask him to bring Qin Feiyang directly to the imperial palace? How to cause so to? The said. That commander did not follow your Majesty's orders at all, said the emperor. The chief said, Preposterous! The emperor suddenly stood up and said angrily, How dare he defy my decree? Your Majesty, please calm down, the chief eunuch hurriedly said. The emperor took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, Is he dead now? The chief eunuch shook his head and said, Not dead, but his cultivation was destroyed in the hands of Qin Feiyang. The emperor said, Immediately go with my decree and let Qin Feiyang come to the imperial palace for an audience. Yes, the chief eunuch nodded. Wait. The chief eunuch was about to turn around and leave when the emperor suddenly said. The chief eunuch asked, Your Majesty, what other orders do you have? The emperor pondered for a while and said, Don't come to the bright palace later. Go directly to the throne room. I will see him there. The throne room. The chief eunuch was shocked and hurriedly said, Your Majesty, this man has already destroyed the throne room twice. Isn't it a little inappropriate to meet him there? I don't believe that he dares to destroy it a third time. The emperor snorted coldly. The chief eunuch wanted to say something, but hesitated. The emperor waved his hand and said, Go quickly, lest you cause any trouble again. Yes. The chief eunuch responded respectfully and opened the portal to leave. The emperor rubbed his forehead and also turned around to leave the bright palace. Above the city wall, although there was a sea of people here at this moment, it was dead silent. Suddenly, a loud laugh sounded, breaking the silence. The person laughing was the imperial preceptor, and this laughter also carried a thick sense of ridicule. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, This imperial preceptor didn't hear wrongly, right? You actually want to return to the imperial capital. That's right, Qin Feiyang said. The imperial preceptor laughed loudly again, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world, and said, Where did you get the confidence to say such big words? Just based on those 18 nine-star combat emperors and Lei Bao? What do you think? Qin Feiyang smiled mockingly. Swish! Facing Qin Feiyang's provocative gaze, the imperial preceptor's eyes immediately turned cold. He took a step forward and grabbed Qin Feiyang's neck and sneered. You are His Majesty's wanted criminal. Even if this imperial preceptor kills you on the spot, no one will dare to say a word. Then try it, Qin Feiyang said indifferently. The imperial preceptor narrowed his eyes and sized up Qin Feiyang and said, Do you really think I don't dare to kill you? If you dared to kill me, you would have already done it. Why talk so much nonsense? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Hearing this, the imperial preceptor increased the strength of his hand. Kacha! A crisp sound came from Qin Feiyang's neck. It was obviously the sound of his throat breaking. However, his expression did not change as he looked at the imperial preceptor calmly. Qin Feiyang, you are too muddle-headed. However, the commander of the Kirin army was burning with anxiety. because he did not know that Qin Feiyang now had something on the imperial preceptor. So, in his opinion, Qin Feiyang's current behavior was purely digging his own grave. Although Lei Bao, Wang Yangfeng, and the others knew, they could not help but feel a little nervous when they saw Qin Feiyang in the hands of the imperial preceptor. Are they finally going to fight? People murmured in a low voice. However, under the expectant gaze of countless people, the imperial preceptor slowly released his hand and withdrew his divine power. What's going on? People looked at each other. The commander of the Kirin army was also stunned. The imperial preceptor actually took the initiative to stop. This was really unprecedented. That's right. Only by being amiable can there be room for negotiation. If we fall out, it won't do anyone any good. Qin Feiyang rubbed his neck and said with a smile, "What's there to discuss? Don't tell me these two are doing something unspeakable." People were suspicious. A hint of ruthlessness flashed in the imperial preceptor's eyes as he said telepathically, "State your conditions." "Okay, destroy your own cultivation, then kneel in front of everyone and tell me the conspiracy you've been plotting all these years. As long as you do that, I'll return Zhuge Shenfeng to you." Qin Feiyang snickered. The imperial preceptor's eyes darkened as he said telepathically, "You should know my character after knowing me for so long. So, you'd better not force me. If you push me too far, I can do anything." "I'll return that sentence to you. You know my character. If you push me too far, I can do anything too." Qin Feiyang laughed cruelly. The imperial preceptor's eyes flashed coldly as he said telepathically, "It seems that you don't intend to settle this peacefully." Qin Feiyang said lightly, "My way of settling this peacefully is the condition I just stated. You see for yourself." The imperial preceptor's face was as dark as water. What are they doing? Why aren't they saying anything? Some people were puzzled. Are you stupid? They must be secretly communicating with each other. It seems that the relationship between these two is not ordinary. However, it's not normal for the imperial preceptor to be restrained in front of a prince who has long been crippled. Chapter 1285. How about this? You return Zhuge Shenfeng to me, and I promise not to do anything to you for 10 years. In addition, I'll help you again. I'll plead with His Majesty to withdraw your arrest warrant." A moment passed. The imperial advisor transmitted his voice to Qin Feiyang. "Not to do anything to me for 10 years? Do you think I will believe your words? As for the so-called pleading, even if I don't return Zhuge Shenfeng to you, you will still have to do it, unless you really want Zhuge Shenfeng to die." Qin Feiyang sneered. The imperial advisor said in a deep voice, "So, there is no room for negotiation? I don't want to talk nonsense anymore. I have given you the conditions, think about it. And now, get out of my way." Qin Feiyang didn't transmit his last sentence, but everyone heard it. Everyone was in disbelief. "Get out of my way." This tone was simply ordering the imperial advisor. Where did this person get his confidence from? How dare he speak to the imperial advisor in such a tone? At the same time, the imperial advisor also felt unprecedentedly sullen and angry. He stared at Qin Feiyang fiercely. In front of everyone, using a commanding tone. This was simply humiliating him. Qin Feiyang secretly laughed. "Zhuge Shenfeng is now in my castle. If you dare to do anything, my brothers will not hesitate to kill him." The imperial advisor's gaze trembled. "Get out of my way!" Qin Feiyang shouted again. The imperial advisor clenched his hands, looked at Qin Feiyang gloomily, and silently retreated to the side. What? He actually got out of the way. Oh my God, what is going on? Everyone's heart was in turmoil, especially the commander of the Kirin army. He was very clear about the relationship between the imperial advisor and Qin Feiyang. It could be said that, no matter which side it was, They were always thinking about getting rid of the other party. And now, Qin Feiyang taking the initiative to deliver himself to the state preceptor was undoubtedly the best opportunity. Just as the state preceptor had said with the emperor's arrest warrant, even if he killed Qin Feiyang in public, no one would say anything. But not only did the state preceptor not do so, but he was also afraid in front of Qin Feiyang. Why? No one could figure out the mysteries hidden in this. The corners of Qin Feiyang's mouth lifted. He took a step forward and walked to the side of the imperial tutor. He said in a low voice, "Oh right, I forgot to tell you. My imaging crystal has recorded a video that is very unfavorable to you." The imperial preceptor's body trembled slightly as he asked, "What image?" "Do you still remember when I first snuck into the ancient pagoda, the first Valley Master and second Valley Master sent you a message saying that they had trapped me and that you were going to protect Zhuge Mingyang?" Qin Feiyang smiled. The state preceptor clenched his fists. "At that time, I have recorded the conversation between you and the first Valley Master. You should know how important this video is and what it will do to you once it is exposed." Qin Feiyang laughed. Damn it, damn it. The state preceptor roared in his heart. He didn't expect that this guy actually had such an important handle on him. But suddenly, he raised his eyebrows, looked at Qin Feiyang, and said to himself, "You are bluffing me." "Bluffing you?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "If you really have this video in your hands, you will definitely tell your father. But it has been so long, why didn't His Majesty have any reaction at all?" The state preceptor sneered. "Haha, then you can take it that I am bluffing you." After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he brushed past the state preceptor. The state preceptor frowned. From Qin Feiyang's expression and tone, he really couldn't tell which was true and which was false. Qin Feiyang. But just as Qin Feiyang was about to leave, an angry roar exploded in the sky. It was as deafening as thunder. Everyone looked up and saw a young man in purple standing proudly in the sky. "It's Zhuge Mingyang. What is he doing here?" "Of course, he is here for revenge." "Revenge? Haven't you heard of such a big thing? What is it?" "You are really ignorant. Back then, in the imperial palace, Zhuge Mingyang was forced to kneel by Qin Feiyang. Although the people of the Zhuge family wanted to block the news, how could such a shocking thing be blocked? What? He actually forced Zhuge Mingyang to kneel? Zhuge Mingyang is the #1 monster in our capital. Kneeling is a great humiliation for him, let alone being forced to kneel. Isn't that right? I heard that after this incident, Zhuge Mingyang couldn't recover from the setback. In the end, he was able to recover with the help of the state preceptor and the emperor. This Qin Feiyang is really powerful. This is nothing. I also heard that Qin Feiyang had a battle with the emperor. Are you kidding? Do you think I am in the mood to joke with you now? Anyway, this Qin Feiyang is extraordinarily terrifying. People whispered to each other. Some looked emotional, some looked admiring, and some looked in awe. At the same time, Qin Feiyang and the state preceptor also looked up at Zhuge Mingyang. The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth immediately curled into a playful smile. The state preceptor's expression changed. He quickly flew to Zhuge Mingyang and said angrily in a low voice, "Who sent you here?" "I came here myself," Zhuge Mingyang said. The state preceptor shouted, "What are you doing here? Are you looking for Qin Feiyang to avenge your humiliation? Don't forget, he has the divine dragon technique." "He has the divine dragon technique. I also have the azure dragon technique," Zhuge Mingyang said telepathically. The state preceptor said the azure dragon technique is no match for the divine dragon technique. "I know. But ancestor, don't forget that I also have 2 other divine techniques, Eclipse Moon and 3,000 incarnations," Zhuge Mingyang said. His hands were tightly clenched together, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. "Eclipse Moon and 3,000 incarnations The state preceptor murmured. He made up his mind and said telepathically, "Okay, I agree to your battle with him, but you must win." "Of course." Zhuge Mingyang smiled coldly. He looked down at Qin Feiyang and shouted, "Qin Feiyang, do you dare to battle with me? No victory, only death. This is an official declaration of war. No victory, only death. In other words, as long as Qin Feiyang agrees, one of us must die here." Everyone's eyes trembled. This was a battle of life and death. It seemed that Zhuge Mingyang had been waiting for the day to avenge his humiliation all these years. "Only death!" Qin Feiyang looked at Zhuge Mingyang and his eyes flickered. "Young master, don't agree with him. If he dares to do this, he must have something to rely on." Wang Yangfeng said telepathically, "You don't understand. This battle is unavoidable." Qin Feiyang replied, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He soared into the sky with monstrous battle intent and landed in front of Zhuge Mingyang. "If you want to risk your life, I'll accompany you." There were no superfluous words, but it was enough to show his determination. He accepted the challenge. There's a good show to watch. Everyone's spirits were lifted and their eyes became hot. Both of them were the #1 monsters in the imperial capital. Whether it was talent or potential, they were recognized by many experts. Chapter 1286. Under the gazes of the crowd, Qin Feiyang and Zhuge Mingyang soared into the sky, reaching the peak of the clouds. When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Although they only had each other in their eyes, they had not lost their minds. If they fought above the city, the people would definitely be plunged into misery and suffering. Quickly follow them. Lei Bao shouted and rushed into the clouds with Wang Yangfeng and the others. On the other side, the imperial preceptor, the commander of the Kirin army, and the others also rushed to the peak of the clouds. How can we miss the battle between the two monsters? The people who were watching the show also rushed forward in a hurry. The peak of the clouds. Zhuge Mingyang looked coldly at Qin Feiyang and said, "The humiliation you gave me back then. Today I will return it to you 10 times, 100 times." Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, a monstrous emperor's aura erupted. In the sky, a violent wind suddenly rose, and the sea of clouds rolled. The rolling emperor's aura carried an astonishing amount of resentment and anger as it pounced toward Qin Feiyang. "I'm afraid you won't have the chance. Back then I could force you to kneel. Today I can also kill you." Qin Feiyang smiled coldly, his eyes full of contempt. Boom! His body trembled, and the emperor's aura poured out, as if it had turned into an invisible dragon, roaring in the sky. "They're fighting so quickly?" When the people behind saw this, they immediately held their breath and scanned the two people on the battlefield, afraid to miss any details. Boom! In just an instant, the two battle chi collided. Crash! Immediately, destructive waves of air rushed out like a tide, covering the sky and covering the earth. Those who were below the combat emperor level had just arrived, and they were so scared that they fled for their lives. The shock waves of the battle between combat emperors were not something they could withstand. At the same time, Qin Feiyang and Zhuge Mingyang each took a step back, their faces faintly pale. In the first round of confrontation, they were evenly matched. After all, the two of them had the same cultivation. However, after stabilizing their bodies, the two of them rushed out at the same time and stared at each other with aggressive gazes. "Qin Feiyang, hand over your life," Zhuge Mingyang roared. "You!" Qin Feiyang sneered. In an instant, the two of them met and threw a punch at each other. With a bang, the two fists collided. Crack! Zhuge Mingyang's arm broke on the spot. His entire body flew out like a meteor, blood spurting out from his mouth. On the other hand, Qin Feiyang was like Mount Tai, standing firmly in the void without moving at all. How is this possible? Zhuge Mingyang was in disbelief. They had the same cultivation and the same attacking style. So how could there be such a huge difference in strength? No way. Zhuge Mingyang's arm is broken, but Qin Feiyang is unscathed. Isn't the disparity too big? The onlookers were also bewildered when they saw the scene. How did Qin Feiyang do it? With my current physical strength, you're already very powerful to be able to take a punch from me without dying. Qin Feiyang looked at Zhuge Mingyang and said. However, his calm demeanor and indifferent tone made Zhuge Mingyang angry out of humiliation. As the #1 monster in the capital, he would not allow anyone to be stronger than him, especially Qin Feiyang. Only by defeating Qin Feiyang in all aspects could his title as the #1 monster in the capital be truly recognized by everyone. Is your physical strength very strong? Then I'll use my physical strength to completely destroy you. Zhuge Mingyang roared and rushed toward Qin Feiyang like a furious lion. He's deliberately provoking you. Don't be fooled. The state preceptor secretly shouted. He knew Qin Feiyang too well. Once he lost his mind while fighting with Qin Feiyang, it was equivalent to announcing his death. However, Zhuge Mingyang turned a deaf ear to him. Qin Feiyang smiled and took a step forward. The energy in his body surged violently. He raised his fist and punched toward Zhuge Mingyang. Come on, let me see how strong you are, Zhuge Mingyang roared. He raised his other arm and punched toward Qin Feiyang. Rumble. When the two fists met, the void twisted and the terrifying aura could topple the mountains and overturn the seas. Those one-star combat emperors who were like the two of them could not withstand the aura and kept retreating. However, everyone's gaze was fixed on the two of them. Crack! Suddenly, a bone-breaking sound that was not very loud was heard. However, it was like a bolt from the blue to everyone's ears. They saw that Zhuge Mingyang's arm was broken into pieces. That's right. This time it was not broken. It was broken into pieces. Flesh and blood splattered in all directions. As for Zhuge Mingyang, he was sent flying and blood kept spurting out from his mouth. Looking at Zhuge Mingyang's miserable state, everyone was shocked. Crushing Zhuge Mingyang, who was at the same level. How terrifying was Qin Feiyang's strength? How did he possess such terrifying strength? No one could figure it out. Zhuge Mingyang and the state preceptor could not figure it out either. Humph! This bastard ate the sacred lion's divine meat. His body has been reborn. With Zhuge Mingyang's strength, he wants to fight him head-on. He's really courting death. In the crowd, an old man covered in a black robe mumbled to himself. He was Wan Qiu, looking at Qin Feiyang. His eyes were shining with a bone-piercing, cold light. After all these years, is this all you've improved? At the top of the clouds, Qin Feiyang looked at Zhuge Mingyang proudly, his expression full of disdain. Ha ha! Zhuge Mingyang stabilized himself in the air and laughed heartily. His laughter was filled with unwillingness, anger, killing intent, and arrogance. Swoosh! Suddenly, a bone-replenishing pill and a regeneration pill flew out from his chinquan bag. Zhuge Mingyang swallowed them in one gulp. There was not the slightest bit of discouragement in his eyes. Qin Feiyang, you're really an amazing person. Unfortunately, you were born at the wrong time to meet me. In this life, you're destined to be my Zhuge Mingyang's stepping stone. Come, dragon roaring in the 9 heavens. Zhuge Mingyang roared to the sky. Battle, Qi rolled out, and a huge azure dragon instantly appeared. The azure dragon was more than 1,000 feet long, like a majestic mountain range. It danced and circled in the sky, emitting a shocking dragon's might. Azure Dragon secret art. This is not the first time you've seen it, but this time it will be stronger than the last time. Zhuge Mingyang's hair fluttered in anger as he roared at Azure Dragon. Tear him apart! Roar! The Azure Dragon immediately let out a deafening dragon roar, and a powerful divine might rolled out, shocking all directions. Divine art. Everyone's heart trembled. As a monstrous genius of the capital, Zhuge Mingyang did not lack perfect battle arts. However, he used the divine art from the beginning and used his full strength. It was enough to see how much he feared Qin Feiyang. Divine might, however. Qin Feiyang frowned. If he remembered correctly, the Azure Dragon's secret art had a total of 3 moves. The first move, Dragon Roaring in the 9 Heavens. The second move, Azure Dragon's Eye. The third move, Azure Dragon's Celestial Phenomenon. And he remembered that the last time he fought with Zhuge Mingyang, the first move, Dragon Roaring in the 9 Heavens, and the second move, Azure Dragon's Eye, had not reached the level of a divine art. Only the third move, Azure Dragon's Celestial Phenomenon. In other words, the first and second moves could only be considered as perfect battle arts, but they were stronger than perfect battle arts. And the third move was the real divine art. But now, why did Zhuge Mingyang's first move, Dragon Roaring in the 9 Heavens, have divine might? Roar! In the blink of an eye, the Azure Dragon roared, and the dragon's might covered the sky. Qin Feiyang raised his arm and pointed at the Azure Dragon. An invisible force rolled out and blasted towards the Azure Dragon. Ruins of End art, fourth move, Ruins of End. However, the Azure Dragon only gently swung its huge tail and easily defeated the invisible force. Puff! Qin Feiyang spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body retreated continuously. It's really a divine art. His eyes trembled. The power of the fourth move of the Ruins of End art had already reached the peak of perfect battle arts, but it was easily defeated by the Azure Dragon. If this was not a divine art, then what was it? Are you surprised? That's right. During the battle at the Imperial Palace, the first and second moves of the Azure Dragon technique were only perfect battle arts. But with the help of the ancestor, I recomprehended the first and second moves, and now they have transformed into divine arts. Zhuge Mingyang secretly laughed. What? Recomprehended? Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. That's right. Everyone says that only battle gods can truly comprehend divine arts. But I, Zhuge Mingyang, relied on the cultivation of a battle saint to comprehend the profound meaning of the Azure Dragon technique. Although I only comprehended it with the help of the ancestor, I believe that I am the first person in the world with such talent. Let me ask, if I am not worthy of the title of the #1 monster in the imperial capital, then who is? You. Have you comprehended a divine art? If you don't have the pill to unlock the door of potential, then tell me, what are you? What do you have to compete with me? Zhuge Mingyang secretly roared, feeling indignant. In terms of talent, he was the #1 monster in the Great Qin Empire. As for Qin Feiyang, he was merely lucky to have obtained the pill formulas for the potential pill. Otherwise, he had already trampled Qin Feiyang under his feet and wantonly trampled on him. I have never denied your talent. I have also never thought of competing with you for the title of the #1 monster. Because these are not what I want. Didn't you realize that all this time it was you who took the initiative to find trouble with me? But these are no longer important, because you indeed deserve to die. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, his entire temperament changed greatly. If he was a person of flesh and blood before, then now he was a god of death that made people tremble. His eyes were full of indifference. To be honest, Zhuge Mingyang's talent scared him. He had to eliminate him as soon as possible. Otherwise it would be even more difficult to deal with in the future. The Azure Dragon bared its fangs and brandished its claws. The dragon's aura was vast and mighty. When it arrived above Qin Feiyang, it raised its huge tail and slammed it towards Qin Feiyang's head. A little bug dares to be impudent in front of me. Qin Feiyang roared and activated the battle formula. His eyes and long hair suddenly turned blood red. Whoosh! Using the phantom steps, he was like a ghost, avoiding the Azure Dragon's huge tail. He swept to the top of the Azure Dragon's head and then stomped on the Azure Dragon's head. "Ayo!" Accompanied by a wail, the azure dragon immediately disintegrated and dissipated in the void. What? Shattering the deity formula with one kick. Everyone was dumbfounded. Just how terrifying was the power of this kick? It was too unbelievable. Chapter 1287. The Battle Formula. With this deity technique in hand, who in the same realm as Qin Feiyang would be able to compete against him? Zhuge Mingyang is really stupid. However, some people knew what was going on. For example, Wan Qiu. The battle formula not only had strong defensive power, but it could also ignore half of the opponent's attack power. Of course, he didn't know much about the battle formula. However, Mu Qing and Lu Xingqian had told him that this divine formula was far superior to other divine formulas. Once the battle formula was activated, Qin Feiyang would have an immortal body. Therefore, he wasn't surprised at all. Boom! While everyone was still in shock, Qin Feiyang took a step forward and finally took the initiative to attack. So what if you have a divine formula? So what if you're talented? As long as you're under someone's foot, you're nothing. He stepped forward step by step. His blood-red hair and clothes fluttered in the wind. He looked like a god of war. His terrifying battle intent roared in all directions, and even the sky trembled. Then you can try and see if you can trample me under your foot. Azure dragons, I destroy. Zhuge Mingyang roared. A divine dragon's eye suddenly appeared in front of him. Then, the eye suddenly opened and a dazzling divine light burst out of it. It was filled with a destructive aura. No matter how many divine formulas you have, I only need one move. Qin Feiyang's face was full of disdain. He raised his hand and punched. Boom! The divine light was destroyed on the spot. Zhuge Mingyang retreated continuously. His body and mind trembled and blood gushed out of his mouth. The power of each punch is comparable to a deity technique. Is this the power of the battle character incantation? No. With the protection of the battle formula, the power of his punch is even more terrifying than a divine formula. Wan Qiu was dumbfounded, and a deep sense of fear emerged in his heart. If it were him, he would have died in Qin Feiyang's hands. Impossible. Zhuge Mingyang was also in disbelief. He shook his head crazily and said, "How did you do it?" Isn't that obvious? Of course, it's the deity technique. Qin Feiyang sneered. He landed in front of Zhuge Mingyang with a single step and slapped his palm toward Zhuge Mingyang's chest. Divine art. What kind of deity technique can crush my azure dragon secret art as easily as crushing dry weeds? I don't believe it. I refuse to accept this. Zhuge Mingyang roared hysterically. His broken arm had already recovered under the effects of the bone-replenishing pill. He clenched his fist and punched out. Third style, Azure Dragon Celestial Phenomenon. Boom! A majestic battle, chi gushed out from his fist. Ding! That battle, chi condensed into an azure dragon and followed the fist as it blasted towards Qin Feiyang. Fist and palm collided in an instant. With a loud bang, Qin Feiyang was knocked back, and a wisp of purple gold dragon blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. But at the same time, Zhuge Mingyang's arm shattered, and blood splattered everywhere, dyeing the sky red. Looks like your battle art isn't that invincible. Ha! Zhuge Mingyang laughed continuously. Although it's not invincible, it's enough to kill you. Qin Feiyang's blood-red eyes surged with a torrential blood-red light, as if a sea of blood was surging. Whoosh! He took a step forward, raised his arm, and slapped towards Zhuge Mingyang's head. Kill me? Zhuge Mingyang retreated as he mocked. I know how strong you are, but do you know how strong I am? If you still think that I'm as weak as before, then you're gravely mistaken. The real battle begins now. Zhuge Mingyang raised his head and laughed. Battle chi surged in front of him, and a crescent moon rose into the sky, shaking the heavens with its divine might. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Isn't that the first move of sun and moon eclipse, dark moon? Zhuge Mingyang had indeed inherited the first generation Marquis Zhuge's legacy. Zhuge Mingyang glanced at the crescent moon, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Now I'll give you a chance. Kneel down and beg for mercy." Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked then. Zhuge Mingyang was like a king as he said arrogantly, "I'll leave your corpse intact. I won't let you die a miserable death." "Haha," Qin Feiyang laughed. "Does he think that he can kill me just because he has sun and moon eclipse? That's too naive. Stubborn people will end up in a miserable state." Zhuge Mingyang smiled ferociously. The crescent moon shook the sky and charged towards Qin Feiyang. Whoosh! However, Qin Feiyang did not retreat. Instead, he went forward and slapped the crescent moon. Rumble! Qin Feiyang immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. The skin on his arm was torn and the flesh was exposed. The purple gold dragon blood splattered in the sky and dyed the sky red. However, the crescent moon was also shattered by his palm strike. "I've said that this is just the beginning." Zhuge Mingyang laughed. Boom! Before he finished his words, another scorching sun rose into the sky. Sun and moon eclipse. Second move, sun eclipse. Qin Feiyang squinted his eyes. The second move, sun eclipse, was at least twice as powerful as the first move, dark moon. 30 years in the east, 30 years in the west, and I, Zhuge Mingyang, don't need 30 years to avenge my humiliation. Prepare to die. Zhuge Mingyang roared into the sky. The scorching sun shook violently in the sky. It was like a meteorite from outer space, carrying a monstrous power as it charged towards Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. He did not retreat and punched forward. Boom! This punch contained all of his strength. However, sun eclipse was too powerful. With a cracking sound, his arm shattered on the spot. Blood gushed out like a waterfall. He lost his balance and was sent flying. As for sun eclipse, it was only shattered. It paused for a moment before continuing to charge towards Qin Feiyang. Is he crazy? He knows that it's a divine art, yet he still went for it? But speaking of which, what divine art is that? Why haven't I seen Zhuge Mingyang use it before? Everyone was bewildered. Then they looked at Qin Feiyang. He took a step into the void and forcefully stabilized his body. Following that, he looked up at the broken sun eclipse. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. Immediately following that, under everyone's incredulous gazes, he took another step forward, raised his left hand, and blasted at sun eclipse. Boom! Sun eclipse finally collapsed. However, Qin Feiyang's left hand was lacerated. He was sent flying again, covered in blood. He's really crazy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done something so stupid. Someone shook his head. Crazy? I think he's at his wit's end. Another person mocked. At his wit's end? You just came to Imperial City, right? Otherwise, why would you say such words? Who in Imperial City doesn't know that Qin Feiyang has obtained the legacy of the previous emperor and grasped the divine dragon art? And look, up until now, has Qin Feiyang used the divine dragon art? Let me tell you, Qin Feiyang's strength is far beyond this. Many people looked at the person who mocked him with disdain. A frog at the bottom of a well dared to speak nonsense. What a joke! At the peak of the clouds, Zhuge Mingyang looked at Qin Feiyang proudly and asked, "How does it feel?" Qin Feiyang stabilized his body and smiled. It's just SOS. Haha, you still dare to be arrogant when you're about to die. Hurry up and show me your divine dragon art. Otherwise, you won't have a chance. Zhuge Mingyang laughed wildly. After defeating Qin Feiyang twice in a row, he had already started to become arrogant. Boom! Battle chi surged. mystic moon, and eclipse rose into the sky at the same time. That world-shaking might rolled out in the sky. At this moment, even though he was a 5-star combat emperor, he felt a great sense of oppression and quickly retreated. Qin Feiyong was surprised. What was going on? Logically speaking, shouldn't Zhuge Mingyang use the third move, Eclipse Moon? Why was it still the first and second move? Was he hiding it and not showing it? Since that was the case, Qin Feiyong waved his hand and took out a healing pill and a regeneration pill, throwing them into his mouth. A square seal condensed. Dragon might and divine might shook the heavens. Yes. That's it. Otherwise it would be boring. Zhuge Mingyang chuckled. With a wave of his hand, the mystic moon and eclipse moon fell together. The distorted void was about to collapse. Qin Feiyong looked at him with contempt. The divine dragon seal roared out and expanded in the wind. In an instant, a divine seal that was like a mountain appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Seeing this, the commander of the Kirin army shouted anxiously, "Those below 7-star were Emperor, retreat quickly!" This was the collision of 3 great divine arts. And most importantly, there was the divine dragon art. The divine dragon art was a divine art created by the previous emperor. Back then, even the previous emperor, Mu Tianyang, was no match for the divine dragon art. One could imagine how terrifying it was. So, the commander of the Kirin army was worried that innocent people would be hurt. Hearing the commander of the Kirin army, everyone did not dare to be careless and retreated quickly. Even some 8-star war emperors could not help but retreat. Rumble. At the top of the sky, the divine dragon seal released a dazzling purple-gold divine light. It was as dazzling as the scorching sun. The mystic moon and eclipse moon also exploded with boundless light. The terrifying destructive power caused the heavens and earth to tremble. Boom! Suddenly, the 3 great divine arts pierced through the sky like comets and collided violently. The heavens and earth trembled. Puff! Zhuge Mingyang's body trembled violently and blood spurted out. Looking at the mystic moon and eclipse moon, under the divine power of the divine dragon seal, they quickly collapsed and disintegrated. However, Qin Feiyong did not move at all. The divine dragon seal was not damaged at all. Too powerful. Is this the power of the divine dragon art? The previous emperor's power is not to be blasphemed. It is not to be offended. Everyone's body and mind trembled. Their eyes were filled with reverence. Looking at Qin Feiyong at this moment, everyone felt as if they had seen the previous emperor return. The combination of the first and second forms could not block the first form of the divine dragon art. Qin Batian, what kind of divine art did you create? At the same time, looking at the scene, the imperial preceptor clenched his fists and roared in his heart. At this moment, the top of the sky fell into a dead silence. Whether it was the imperial preceptor or the others, they could not help but feel fear when they saw the divine dragon seal above Qin Feiyong's head. As you wish, the divine dragon seal is out. However, what do you plan to do next? Qin Feiyong stood proudly and looked at Zhuge Mingyang, who was in an extremely sorry state. As soon as he finished speaking, you're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.